Where's my Grace? I know it. All right. I will call this regularly scheduled meeting to order. If you'll join in salute to our nation's flag. Ready, begin. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. We will do a roll call and conflict of interest, please.
Councilmember Abram? Here and none. Councilmember Bixel?
Here and none.
Vice Mayor Franco?
Here and none.
Councilmember Moniz?
Here and none.
Mayor Bublak?
Here and none. Thank you for that. All right, and then approval of agenda as posted or amended.
So moved.
Second.
We have a first and a second, and he's out on third. You take a roll, please.
Councilmember Abram?
Yes.
Good.
Councilmember Bixel?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Franco?
Yes.
Councilmember Moniz?
Yes.
Mayor Bublak?
Yes, thank you. No more baseball. Okay. And then we also I need to identify that the item C, 2C was League of California Cities. That won't be today. He'll come at another time. All right, and so we'll start with May as Chronologically Gifted American Month. Mr. Wilson.
I suppose I could have done it up there, but I wanted to prove I could still do it around even at my age.
Don't fall coming back.
This is in recognition of Older Americans Month, 2023. Whereas the city of Turlock includes a number of older Americans who contribute their time, wisdom, and experience in our community, and whereas communities benefit when people of all ages, abilities, and backgrounds have the opportunity to participate and live independently, and whereas the city of Turlock recognizes the need to create a community that offers the services and supports older adults may need to make choices about how they age, and whereas the city of Turlock can work to build an even better community for older residents by not limiting or thinking about aging, exploring and combating stereotypes, emphasizing many aspects of aging, inspiring older adults to push past traditional boundaries, and embracing our community's diversity. Therefore, I, Amy Blueback, Regan Wilson, on behalf of
Looking
Amy
good today.
Blueback, by virtue of the authority vested in me as the mayors of the city of Turlock, on behalf of the entire city council and all our citizens, do hereby proclaim May 23rd to be Older Americans Month. We urge every resident to celebrate older citizens, help to create an inclusive society, and accept the challenge of flexible thinking around aging.
Awesome. We got you covered, Dale. All right, and next we have Legacy Health Endowment, Mr. Jeffrey Lewis. Come on up, sir. I'm not saying anything. No.
Thank you. Mayor, members of the City Council, my objective this evening is to update you on the mobile health service program that you paid for and launched in January, as well as to give you an update on our person-centered care long-term care program that we've launched in September of last year. City of Turlock in January hired the Community Health Centers of America to deliver mobile health services across the City of Turlock. Program launched in January. Visits occur every Tuesday within the city at a variety of different locations that would include Westside Ministries, Salvation Army, Turlock Gospel Mission, International Rescue Committee, Monte Vista Chapel, and United Cerebral Palsy. Patients who visit the mobile care program range from pediatric to geriatric. What they have found is a number of the patients often have primary care providers of one sort or another, but the wait list to get in to see their primary care provider in many cases is anywhere from 2 to 4 months. So they present at a mobile care clinic. The program has begun to pick up. January, they saw 22 patients. March, it increased to 30. I suspect by the end of April, they'll get to 30 plus. And we'll see how many patients they see in May. The people they see range considerably, from refugees to female patients who are living in a homeless shelter. Several people who've made appointments at the mobile services program because they couldn't find access anywhere else, needed to get their program goals in place, for example, for a certified nursing assistance program. The mobile clinic helped them obtain the needed services they could get so they could apply. We've had a male patient who was working for a homeless shelter who presented with a series of heart issues. He was addressed on the spot and taken care of back on his medication. The program covers his medication costs as well as giving him whatever medical services he needs. Another shelter participant had lost all their prescriptions. The mobile care services program wrote them new prescriptions after a visit and made sure that the person had access to pharmacy services at no cost. One of the sadder stories is an older woman who's been experiencing severe breast pain, and if I remember the story correctly, for years. Finally got in to see the mobile care services program. She's been hooked up with a free mammogram program to test for breast cancer, and they're waiting the results. If she needs services, she'll continue to receive them through the mobile services program and whatever other services she may need in Turlock. The long-term care program that we created through Legacy Health Endowment, we launched in September of last year. The goal of the program was twofold. One, to provide middle-income people over 60 with services to keep them independent in their own homes. And second, to begin to measure the cost of that care, of what does it cost to care for someone as they get older with limitations on activities of daily living and various chronic diseases, or what we refer to as comorbidities. We focused, because we've designed the program, on increasing numbers of middle-income retirees. Many people in our communities and across both counties, in Stanislaus and Merced counties, are on Medi-Cal. Some of them are duly eligible for both Medicare and Medi-Cal, who qualify for a variety of services. But when you're middle income and you need long-term care services at home, absent a long-term care service policy that you have to buy as a supplement, Medicare doesn't cover it unless you've been pre-hospitalized, and then you would get certain services through a home health agency. Our program fills the gap to make sure that you have whatever services you need to remain independent and to get healthier. We have a concurrent program that we call Bridge to Home through Covenant Care Home and Hospice that we created a number of years ago. So for any Medicare patient who is discharged before they're discharged from Emmanuel Medical Center or any other hospital and live in our footprint, the 19 zip codes, they get access to Covenant Care at Home and Hospice immediately before discharge. So it's the first 48 hours of care that we focus on to make sure that that patient doesn't it's not readmitted. The hospital gets penalized and the patient loses track. In this case, for the Bridge to Home program, if they need medications purchased, they purchase the programs because we're providing the funding. If they need home health services, they're provided home health services. They need transportation to the doctor the next day, the program provides all that. So the whole goal is to provide a series of services that will range from what we refer to as a long-term care service system to really evaluate what's the cost impact in the system, but most importantly, what does it cost to care for individuals as they get older with one or more chronic disease conditions, so that we can have a database and that we can report to the legislature and to Congress as well. The reason we focus on the middle class is because 40% of middle-income workers often don't qualify for Medicaid services across the country, particularly true in California. I use the line in California, at least, and locally, to say, if you're middle income, the government's response is good luck. You're on your own. So we created this program to fill the gap, and I will tell you, quite successfully. The Person-Centered Care Program, we have a series of partners. CareLinks, which is AARP's largest respite care provider across the country, is our intake company and the respite care provider. Community Care Choices is our other partner for palliative care. Community Health Centers of America is our federally qualified health center partner and physician services. TinRx, which is a pharmacy in Turlock, is our pharmacy partner. All these services are free. So any resident of Turlock who needs these kinds of services can access them by calling the 855 number anytime Monday through Friday. And they get screened, some assessment, and hopefully within 2 or 3 weeks they're getting services. But I've given you a HIPAA protected list to protect all of us. I've got 2 lists here, but I wanted to show you the kinds of patients that we're seeing through the long-term care program. This list ranges from 63 to 96. The kinds of services they need will vary, but what is important here is to look at the number of hours of care that they're getting at no cost. It'll range from 120 hours here to 84 hours up here to 76 and to 20. Again, if we're using our charitable dollars combined with the city's charitable dollars that the city's granted to give us to provide these services. The kinds of things that are happening in the home, we are discovering that many of these people are at home at risk. So you'll see hand railings put in by our partner Jukebox. I forgot to mention them as a partner. They come into the home and they provide the railings and whatever in-home assistance is necessary to rebuild the home for safety purposes. We have a 63-year-old female who lives in Turlock who was homebound in a mobile home until she received a scooter through this program, and now she's independent, out and about, and able to go shopping and do other things. You'll see on the top, in this particular individual, grab bars. The kinds of diseases these people are facing, the chronic disease conditions, range considerably, but the care doesn't change. So the services, if you look at the top, you'll see in-home care services. If they need home modifications, the modifications are made. If you need palliative care is provided. If you need in-home food assistance, if you can't, beyond what United Samaritans Foundation does, which is amazing work, it's provided, it's delivered. Hope counseling services for people who have behavioral health challenges, who might be grieving or trying to figure out life in general. All of it is provided inclusively. I will never say I don't need help. I'm not a social media person. I know some of you are great on social media. I don't participate personally. But the extent that you have access to your constituents across the districts, if you could alert them to the person-centered care program or send information that we'll happily provide you with, getting that information out to them is critical. The second thing that I want to talk to you about is the data from the mobile services program. So my job as your free consultant is to keep you informed. So we'll evaluate the data come the end of April, and then we'll evaluate the data halfway through May. If the data doesn't prove beneficial to the city of Turlock based on the contract that was created, I will report back to the city manager with very specific recommendations. I may have to recommend that we reduce from 4 days a month to 2 days a month and reduce the contract proportionally as well to save the city some money. Because services are being delivered, people are accessing the services, but if we're not seeing more than 30 people a month, I can't justify saying to you, continue to spend let's modify the contract. The provider knows that. They're going to do other things. I have a full-time staff person on my team, Allie Jeffrey, who's done a marvelous job helping us with this program, and she spends more hours than she'll ever get credit for trying to keep things on track. But, again, my job, my responsibility to you is to say, okay, things are working. They could work better. We're going to figure out how. But in some cases, they may not, and that's also my responsibility to come back and say, okay, some things aren't working. It's giving services for free, as you've all experienced, is the hardest thing you can do. Getting people to access these services is difficult. We have in Turlock a $2 prescription drug program for 700 different generic medications. So Mike Ireland is here from Witten, Ireland. They have the premier, as I love her, broker, Lynn Bull, who represents the city. Lynn Bull represents the bulk of self-funded health insurance plans across Turlock and the community. And she's pulling her hair out, and obviously I lost mine. She's pulling her hair out trying to figure out why her employers are not using the $2 program. What we learned, sadly, is that people won't necessarily change pharmacies. They like their pharmacist just like they like their physician or their PA or their NP. But when you're paying a $10 or $15 or $20 copay, and you can take the same drug at 10 Rx for $2, you have to ask why. Fortunately, we've seen an upswing in the number of people using the $2 program. But we also have a $2 insulin program for any person in Turlock who's got commercial insurance or who is uninsured. They can go to 10Rx, fill out a short form. It does not ask immigration questions. It simply says proof of that you live in the 19 zip codes. And you'll get your insulin for $2. If you can't afford the $2, it's free. We pick up the 100% of the copay or the difference between the person's copay and the $2, plus a dispensing fee for the pharmacy. These are great programs. Turlock has got initiatives doing that no other city in America or no other city in California, I would like to say, is actually doing. You're pioneering things, you're trying things. We're delighted to provide the ideas and financial support for many of them. But I would be remiss if I didn't tell you it doesn't get frustrating by the fact that you can't drag people to a pharmacy and say, I'm going to save you $15 on your meds, just do this. But, that's human behavior. So let me stop at that and take whatever questions you might have.
So you spoke about the social media. How do we get the post from your group so that we can post it on city stuff, on ours?
City has been a great partner. I will compliment the city manager, as I like to do, because with his approval, every utility bill, TID bill, had a flyer in it that alerted people to these programs. I would say to the city manager, we need to do it again. We'll get you this information in English and Spanish or whatever language you want to mail to your constituents or to post in terms of social media. It's the best thing that we can ask for. And, your help would be enormous. So thank you.
Awesome. Questions, Mr. Lewis? Thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it. All right, this time is set aside for public participation. I do have some cards here. It's within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city. You'll have 3 minutes each to speak. The timers are on each of the walls. And with 5 cards I have, Michael? It's been a while since you've been here, Michael. Welcome, and it's only 3 minutes now.
All right, let's begin. So this meeting is going to address to President of the United States of America. We're all Biden citizens, all said. American Resolve in just 5 minutes or less, number 7. Anything for holiday. To the Commander-in-Chief, President Joe Biden, thank you for your life. Thank you for my life as I know it. Being homeless, I know that you thought of our homeless community here in Turlock, and you thought of me too. Like many homeless people, we wish you all good safekeeping. I was a little nervous. You have more time. Okay. Finally, saying law-abiding is not fun and kitschy-like. I am homeless, and thank you for the Olympic Games boycott for your personal health. History has gotten us this far, and your manifold witness will keep us. Having just one question for you, Mr. President. How do you win over an audience without a song for you? Hail to the chief. What do we have around us without peaceful boycotts from here to there every so often? Queen Elizabeth II, an allied force, the United Kingdom's Queen Mother, would have the perfect Bible verse for this evening, but instead I have a famous quote for you guys. I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service. God help me to make good my vow, and God bless all of you who are willing to share it in it. I look to Mount Rushmore and the Queen Mother, and somehow being here and throughout the beginning of its construction, she was there through and through. Now that's some feat for all of us to marvel at. Grandparents' Day and Mother's Day will never be the same. Nobility is defined as having the quality of state, being noble in character, and quality of rank. To King Charles and his sons, Prince William, Prince Harry, and the Queen Consort, Prince Kate Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, my condolences go out to you and your family. One of my favorite national holidays is National Family Day. I'll make sure to say another prayer for you on that day itself. Closing this letter, I wish you all happy holidays. To be happy is to be gay. The song dedications are Hark the Herald Angels Sing by Mariah Carey, Miss You Most at Christmas Time by Mariah Carey, Rise by Katy Perry. Thank you.
Thank you. Milt?
Yes, I have a handout there. Yes, Milt Treeweiler, and I'm going to talk about groundwater contaminants. There was an article in the Turlock Journal. It was July 29th of 2017, nearly 5 years ago. And this is what the article said. New drinking water regulations costly for Turlock. A new drinking water regulation from the State Water Resources Control Board will mean millions of dollars in new equipment and maintenance for Turlock's well system. The State Water Board adopted a regulation July 18th that creates a maximum allowable level of 1,2,3-trichloropropane, an industrial solvent that's been found as an impurity in soil fumigants and persists in the groundwater. In 2013, the California Environmental Protection Agency designated TCP as a human carcinogen. Farmers didn't know it when they were putting this on their land. They complied with all the applications of their soil fumigants, said Municipal Services Director Michael Cook during a presentation about the new regulations to the Turlock City Council. So this is just a report of what Michael Cook was informing this council, but obviously the only person on this council at that time was Mayor Blue Black. It's mainly a San Joaquin Valley problem, said Cook. The early indications show that almost 30% of Turlock's wells have detectable levels of TCP. The new TPC regulations will go into effect January 1st, 2018, which is when, just at the time that Mayor Blue Black took over, over 4 years ago. The city of Turlock will have to perform quarterly monitoring, public notifications if the contaminants is found, install wellhead treatment, and implement water system chlorination. Cook estimated the capital cost of the well treatment will be $3 to $5 million, not including annual operations and maintenance expenses. We are looking for a 2-year implementation timeline, feeling that the time we need to engineer and go out to bid to get this thing done. We thought 2 years was realistic. The state said no. We'll give you 6 months, said Cook. The city will have to declare an emergency to bypass the normal bid process and get everything installed by the state mandated timeline, said Cook. He also informed the council of possible cost recovery. That was 3 minutes? Mm-hmm. Good golly.
It does go fast. We do have the paperwork you gave us as well, Mr. Treeweiler. Gavin. I saw the gnat also that you were. I did.
Good evening, everyone. Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, city staff, and community. Thank you. Gavin Klein, Field Representative for Congressman John Duarte's office. Just a quick little update. Congressman Duarte was able to attend the Ceres Legislative Breakfast last Friday. It was an amazing turnout, a great opportunity for the community to hear from their elected officials and hear about our district. Congressman Duarte had the honor of welcoming the Central Valley Honor Flight to the U.S. Capitol last week. Since its inaugural flight in 2013, the Central Valley Honor Flight has sent countless veterans to Washington, D.C. to meet with policymakers, see the sights, and receive the recognition they so truly deserve. This past Wednesday, Congressman Duarte participated in the House Natural Resource Committee oversight hearing examining the budget for the Department of Interior. Congressman Duarte was also able to question Secretary Haaland about the federal government's failed approach to water policy in California, regulatory hurdles blocking water storage, and how to improve effective cooperation between the state and federal government. The Clean Water Act is an essential piece of legislation that ensures clean water for every American. However, the implementation of the Clean Water Act has significant room for improvement. Congressman Duarte is committed to both protecting our access to clean water and ensuring that our farmers are not overburdened with regulatory uncertainties. As we approach this summer, we're looking at the potential of flooding here in the valley. Congressman Duarte and our staff are dedicated to mitigating the impacts of flood damage and ensuring our valley families do not have to deal with them again. Thank you also for taking the trip to DC on behalf of Stanislaus County. We hope you guys had a great time and great discussion with Congressman, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Justin.
All right, good evening. Oh, that is very close. I'm already loud enough. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Justin Farkas. I'm here today representing the Office of Assembly Member Alanis, District 22 in the state legislature. I am here before you today to discuss some of the priorities that we have coming up this week. We've been very involved in the district this week. However, there's a very pressing issue that we are facing in our state, and that is known as the epidemic of fentanyl. We hear up and down our district from Modesto to Gustine that public safety is a top priority of our constituents, but regardless of the officer response times or fear that reporting crime will do no good, nothing strikes fear in families more than the fentanyl epidemic. Whether knowingly or unknowingly using this narcotic through counterfeit medicines, users of fentanyl are dying at an exponential rate here in our county and in our state. I think most recently we heard that 2 per week in Stanislaus County are dying. That's over 100% increase since 2021. And we have put a lot of pressure on the state legislature to do something about it. So they were previously planning on having a special hearing on the fentanyl crisis in June. We fought really hard. We worked hard, held a press conference last Tuesday, putting pressure on some of the individuals in our legislature who were against putting these bills up for public comment and speech, and we've actually come to a resolution. There's going to be a special hearing on fentanyl, 5 separate bills. That's going to be happening Thursday. So we're really happy that we're able to get that done. I strongly encourage you folks to reach out to our office. Our district office is in Modesto, 1010 10th Street, Suite 5800. You can also come call us at 209-521-2201, and we'd love to help provide any information on the bills that'll be heard. There's going to be 5 bills specifically regarding fentanyl heard on Thursday. Any information that you folks need regarding the bills, who's writing them, what assembly members are on the public safety committee that need to hear that this is coming after families and children, we'd be happy to help you guys get in touch with those people. Thank you.
Thanks. Ron?
Okay. Good evening. Okay. Potter's Lane in Orange County was the first permanent supportive housing unit to use shipping containers. Built in 2017, it houses 15 veterans in 480 square foot living spaces. It includes a community room, laundry room, and office spaces, along with a courtyard and garden. The design can accommodate singles, couples, and small families, with much more living space and flexibility of use than what Custom Containers 915 proposed. I searched out a couple places in Turlock where something like this could be built and used Google Maps to show the possibilities for placement of 32 such units. The first example is in my own neighborhood, where the owner of this lot has not been able to develop it for at least the past 19 years. I am sure that my neighbors would welcome veterans and seniors. On the east side of town, a church has a large empty lot, and I can think of no finer act than for them to minister to the physical, mental, and spiritual needs of the least among us. On the northeast side of town, where 2 council members live, there's Pinckney Park, which has about 1 3/4 acres of open land, which is rarely used. I have driven by it during weekends and on early weekday evenings and saw the area completely empty, in contrast to other parks that were filled with families, kids, and sport teams. A portion of the open area would be a great location for recovering drug addicts, as they will be away from their former drug dealers and addict friends. All the options I showed have issues that need to be addressed, as does the proposed location next to Kelso's. At the last meeting, Councilmember Moniz spoke about how no one wants this in their backyard, but how a decision needs to be made. Clearly, there is an opportunity for our leaders to demonstrate that you truly have the heart of a public servant, that you do not consider yourselves to be above and better than the rest of us, and are willing to lead by example. So, are you leaders with a heart of a servant, or are you hypocrites? The choice is yours. Choose wisely. Thank you.
I don't have any other cards. Was there anybody else who wished to speak in public participation?
Three meetings ago, there was a,
Can you pull that down just a little bit, Mr. Puffer? Thank you.
3 meetings ago, there was an item to lease some vehicles for the SRWA. And it was tabled for the next meeting on the 11th of April, at which time it was removed. And now it's not even there. And I was under the impression that this was a time of the essence matter. And then, I'm not sure, maybe someone can tell me, but I understand now that the water plant's not gonna open up in June. I don't know when it is, but if it's been delayed, then perhaps time is not of the essence. But still, someone on staff or whatever should go out and make a decision if we're going to lease or purchase vehicles, and maybe get this thing done before all of a sudden it's a time of the essence matter again. Thank you.
Michael, please. Anyone else? Yes. Debbie, yeah, sorry.
Good evening, Debbie Hall-Coftonell. Chief, I have a question. I have a grief share class that I participate with at Good Shepherd. So yesterday morning at 9:30 in the morning, I am driving by Denier Park. There are 2 tents set up in the park. You've done such a beautiful job keeping it clear of the tents and the homeless. And then as I went into the Cooper Avenue house, there was a homeless man that was obviously having a moment of psychosis, talking to the air, sits down on the street and stays. Well, it doesn't feel safe for me as a woman, so I lock the building and I wait for my grief share participants to come. I called the non-emergency line and was on hold for 20 minutes. That's not the norm when I've called, but I know they probably had a lot of things going on. But tonight, driving to the meeting, the park again has homeless people, tents, etc. The city council previous meeting passed the approval of the containers. And in Pacific Grove, they had meetings with the residents for Project Home Key. They listened to the residents. I know you guys are listening to us, but it seems like it's after the fact. We were told in December that Mr. Lewis would give us a report monthly, and he is giving reports, but the reports are coming after you have presented and you're starting to act on things. So my request to you is, can we have a little more community involvement before the decisions are made? It doesn't feel like you've been listening to us, and I know I said that previously. I think you all care about the city. I have no confusion about that. But I don't know if you're reaching out and just trying to approach the community. In October, there was a meeting about lessening homelessness. Monterey they've reduced their homeless by 50%. I'd like to know how they're doing that. I talked about Malibu at one point. Malibu says the Boise decision, there's nothing in the Boise law that says you have to provide sleeping in the city. You can provide alternative sleeping locations. And so I've never heard back from that as a possible proposal. Project Home Key has been resisted in many areas, and I personally am not in favor of the vote, but it's been made. I just appreciate everything you're doing. Thank you.
Did you want to have offline, Chief? Ms. Coffs, now, if you'll have a conversation offline with the chief later, he'll help you out with that. Anybody else who didn't fill out a card that wished to? Yes, Ryan?
All right, so I wasn't able to attend last week's meeting, but something I'm really happy to see is that Wayside Drives got paid. I saw that on the Instagram, and I'm super stoked about that, and I can't wait to see more roads getting paved throughout our city. I'm super happy about that. Also, I just want to acknowledge you guys have been posting a lot more on social media. I really like that. I like the city agenda. The mayor's been posting the last two of them. I love seeing that. I wish more of you would be more active on it. Like you guys mentioned, like you want people to come to these and be more aware of what's going on. Post it online. Like even take example from my page. I try to post as much as I can when I can about things, and that's just how we get people to know about what is actually going on here. And then another thing is the homeless. We're spending basically $10 million for 50 rooms, which, I mean, we need to solve this problem, I agree, but that's a very high price to pay for 50 rooms. That's something I am kind of worried about. That just seems like an absurd amount of money to be spending. But besides that, I'm super happy to see that the city's been making some great progress. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to close public comment, and we'll move on to motion waiving reading of ordinances on the agenda except by title.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Will you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Abram?
Yes.
Councilmember Bixel?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Franco?
Yes.
Councilmember Moniz?
Yes.
Mayor Bublak?
Yes, passes 5-0. Consent calendar, there's a green sheet for consent item 5K King. Are there any other items to be removed for separate consideration? If not, is there a motion?
Motion to approve as amended.
Have a motion?
Second.
And a second, and looks like a third over there? No, you're just ready to vote.
Did I go too fast?
All right, call.
Councilmember Abram?
Yes.
Councilmember
Last call.
Bixel?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Franco?
Yes.
Councilmember
Michael.
Moniz?
Yes.
Mayor Bublak?
Yes, Michael, buddy, can you help me out? Thank you. Okay, moving on. That was 5-0. All right, now to final readings, there are none. Public hearings, item 7A, introduction, and that'll be Mr. Lohr and Mr. Petrolakis. It's a lot of pink going on there. Really? Oof.
Referring to my binder with all the pink Post-its. What we're doing here, Mayor and Council, is your Chapter 1, Section 1-601 in the Municipal Code has a number of provisions about minimum insurance requirements. Primary among them is that it calls for workers' compensation insurance in the amount of $1 million, and also general liability in the amount of $1 million and $2 million in the aggregate. So over time, those numbers are low, especially on the general liability. The workers' comp is done by state law. So what we're proposing here is to revise the ordinance, and the main insurance minimums will be done in a resolution passed from time to time by the city council. This will allow us to include more things that come up in the insurance provisions. And this is the insurance that is provided to the city for people getting a city permit, using city property, that sort of thing. And so that's the proposal before you. It's pretty simple. This will be done in two phases. The ordinance changes tonight, and then later, after the ordinance is effective, the resolution will come back to you. And there's a draft resolution in your package that you're not acting on tonight, but we wanted to put it out there to you and the public in case there was any input on that. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Petulakis? Okay, let's open it to public. Anyone wishing to speak regarding this? Okay, closing public comment and bringing it back for
Motion to approve. Second.
motion and second. Will you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Abram?
Yes.
Councilmember Pixel? Vice Mayor Franco?
Yes.
Councilmember Moniz?
Yes.
Mayor Bublak?
Yes, it passes 5-0. Thank you for that. Item 7B, introduction and first reading. Mr. Moreno.
Thank you, Mayor, Council members. Item we have before you is a public hearing to address what we identify as a signing authority for our city manager. What we're referring to is basically our procurement practice and how we actually identify contracts and what the city manager can actually execute and what actually has to be set and brought to council. Currently, our limitations are for contract signing authority $50,000. The limitation is basically it's kind of an ebb and flow. Different cities do different things and have different practices on what that limitation meets. The request is to change our $50,000 limit to a $100,000 limit. What this actually does is expedite process within city staff. Currently, what it takes to actually get something done and bring it all the way through the formal process of council is about a month. Having to negotiate the contract takes about 2 weeks. Getting it all structured through legal and getting it onto the agenda takes about another 2 weeks. So you're actually bypassing that practice and actually creating more efficiency that we can get done things done a lot more efficient and faster. Obviously, anything over $100,000 would still come to council. But what this does too is allow us to kind of free our hands in a sense of the way that we can move forward and get things done in a more practical manner. Is there any questions?
Yes, would it be possible to post all of those contracts on a monthly basis just so that there's transparency?
I think that can be resolved. Would you like a time frame in which they stay on there? How would you like to see that document
Maybe
placed?
every month, just do a new one.
These are the
and
ones that are
then-
executed every month? Yeah, I definitely sure we can do that.
Okay, I appreciate that. Any other questions for him?
Yeah, I like that idea, you know, in the city manager's monthly report, seems like a fair place to
Yeah.
put that. And I apologize for not asking this ahead of time, but do you anticipate every contract that is under $100,000 would go through this process? Because just, you know, sometimes contracts under that threshold might be more toward like a policy, like adoption.
So policy
type
adoptions
thing?
actually have to go through a more formal public hearing such as this one. So if there is actions in the sense that public hearings have to be made, they have to formally go through a council action regardless of what that dollar amount is. Also, what you see is that there's something as far as a contract where the city manager deems that's controversial in some format. I'm sure he would actually bring that regardless.
Mr. Wilson?
I would just reiterate what Mr. Moreno has said. If I think there's a policy issue involved, then for sure, I don't care if it's $10,000 or $100,000, I would bring that issue to the city council. And in terms of monthly reporting, I'd be happy to do that. It's good information to put out there.
Awesome. Any other questions before we open it? Okay, let's open it to the public. Anyone wishing to speak? Milt?
I did have some questions, but I think the questions were mostly answered. Where is the accountability? I I kind of had, execute certain contracts. I didn't understand approve and execute certain contracts, what it meant by certain contracts. I think if you could give us a couple examples of what this would be, I mean, what would this regard? Just give us a couple examples of what you would be talking about that would need to be done. Is that possible, Mr. Wilson?
Mr.
Or-
Moreno did just now, but if you want to, can you continue with it? Just-
Sure. Some great examples would be professional services. That's primarily what you see for a contract of that size. Maybe we need some surveying services need to be done for a certain project. Instead of going through the full motions of getting that task done, we could expedite that done and get it done a lot faster, so that it actually can move our construction projects faster too as well.
Please,
Okay.
more roads. I'm sorry, do you have anything else?
No, that completes it. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? All right, I almost closed it.
So professional services, would that also be certain contracts to enter into for purchasing items? Like, for example, automobiles, $100,000. Some may say, well, they don't really need the vehicle, but he could theoretically spend $100,000 for 6 months and
Mr.
get
Wilson?
vehicles before coming before the council. Thank you.
Mr. Wilson?
When it comes to issues like automobiles, which is a fixed asset, we would certainly have the council approve the number of automobiles before he even went out and sought to purchase them.
Thank you. Anyone else? Right?
So, $100,000 seems like a lot of money to me to just let anybody be able to spend without the city council approval. I just learned that it was the limit right now is $50,000. I think an increase of $75,000 is appropriate, but $100,000 just seems like too much money to me. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I'm gonna close the public comment, bring it back. What's the will of our conversation, or?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Abram?
Yes.
Councilmember Bixel?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Franco?
Yes.
Councilmember Moniz?
Yes.
Mayor Bublak?
Thank you.
Yes, passes 5-0. Thank you for that. That's interesting. All right, so I'm reading this going, what? All right, so item C has been moved to May 9th, right? So we're going to go to action items. 8A, authorize the city manager to enter into agreement with Winton, Ireland Insurance Agency. Mr. Lohr.
Michael, you want to come up?
I do, I'm sorry, can you wait? Thank you for that, Mr. Bridegroom. Okay, I'm gonna open the public, although we won't be voting on it. Item C is introduction of ordinance, annual deposits and amending. So, anybody wish to speak? Thank you for pointing that out.
You know me, a bugger knows. Okay, since the text of this wasn't in the agenda package, boy, you have this up close. I'm not quite sure this is applicable, but you talk about the general fund reserve policy. I don't want to be too harsh on this, but a number of months ago, there was a statement made by the finance director that he felt that the general fund was too large and that we should spend some of that money. And I just want to remind the council, it is you five who determine what the policy is, not city staff. And I will also remind you that we're likely heading into a period of time to where we'll probably need all the money in the reserve fund as we can have. So that's my comments.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? Okay, thank you again for reminding me of that. I'm gonna close that public comment and it will be back rescheduled on May 9th agenda. Mr. Lohr.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, item 8A before you tonight is a request to enter into an agreement with Winton, Ireland Insurance Agency, excuse me, for an initial term of 3 years with 2 one-year options to extend for a total amount not to exceed $300,000 to provide insurance broker services to the city for property and casualty insurance. The staff report lists out 8 insurance coverages that will be procured by Winton, Ireland on behalf of the city. In addition, the agreement includes several program administrative duties that are outlined in Exhibit A of the agreement. To get to the proposed agreement before you tonight with Winton, Ireland, staff issued an RFP, request for proposal, and responses were evaluated based on 5 categories, including qualifications and experience, which was 30 points out of 100. Approach and methodology, 20 points. References, 10 points. Fee proposal, 35 points. And additional coverage and services, 5 points. The city received 4 proposals before or on the March 16th, 2023 deadline, excuse me. And after a full evaluation by a 3-panel member RFP evaluation committee, Winton, Ireland was selected with the highest rated proposal. Winton, Ireland is one of the largest regional privately held insurance agencies in California, which was originally founded in 1913 here in Livingston. They have a long and proud history of providing these services to employers in the Central Valley and have partnered with Keenan to establish a strong working relationship with public agencies throughout California. And they've been working with the city of Turlock since the early 1980s. So with me tonight is Michael Ireland Jr. and Blaine Adams. So if there are any questions, we'll be happy to answer them.
I have a question. How come George always leaves when we talk about insurance?
I would take it personal.
Seriously?
Yeah, it's a thing. He gets this itch and twitch, and it's terrible. But, congratulations on you also being older business a month, right? So since 1913, so, though we just we're embracing the chronologically gifted people, well, businesses too is awesome. Anyway, let me open it to the public. Anyone wishing to speak regarding this? You should have brought your dog. We'd have way more conversations. Okay, I'll close the public comment. What are you thinking?
Motion to approve.
Oh, second.
And thank you
obviously,
for-
thank you, Mike. You guys do a great job.
All your years of service to the city.
I
Thank
did
you.
not pay Jeffrey on his comments about.
Right?
No, I know.
But it was about
but
Lynn,
we
not
know
you.
Lynn is the stuff. So
Do you want me to tell George he can come back in?
I can't tell you all that, my staff, Gloria's over here, Gloria, Elliott, and, Blaine, he's the Sherpa, he does all the grunt work, but, our staff, very much appreciates working with the city staff, and I have to tell you that we welcomed, the RFP because every once in a while you just have to go through it. Winton, Ireland has been the city's broker for quite a number of years, and we could always defend our work and our fee schedule. Paul's, when you have an RFP, you can have a very simple one on one side of the spectrum where it's, here's what we need, give us quotes. And then you have this, on the other side of the spectrum, a full-blown broker selection, and we'll worry about the policies later. And that's what this one was, very complicated, and it was very tempting to pick up the phone several times, Sarah, but it said don't do that.
She blocked
so
you.
we do appreciate your staff and the communication link, and Paul even said we're just very comfortable and it works. So I think our heart and soul is all in this community together, and we want what's best for it. So we're glad to be on board for the next 3 years for sure, and hopefully 2 after that. But thank you.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Any comments before we, okay, we have a motion and a second.
Councilmember Abram?
yes.
Councilmember Bixel?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Franco?
Yes.
Councilmember Moniz?
Yes.
Mayor Bublak?
Yes, it passes 5-0. Thank you all. Appreciate it. All right, now we have a green sheet of, wow. Holy smokes. Okay, wait, can you just come right back up, Mike, real quick? Let's see what happens. All right.
That was like impeccable timing.
I did still. Ms. Quintero, how are you?
Doing well. So, good evening, Mayor, council, members of the public. The item before you tonight is a proposed service provider agreement between the City of Turlock and We Care Program Turlock for the operation of a day-use navigation center at 275 3rd Street as a 6-month pilot program. The center proposes to be open from Monday through Friday from 7:30 to 3 o'clock. It would be open to anyone over the age of 18. Housing, navigation services, supportive case management, and rapid rehousing services would all be offered at the center. There is a green sheet before you tonight to make various updates to the documents. One of the major changes was to add the legal name of We Care from We Care to We Care Program Turlock, to correct the address from 275 Broadway to 275 3rd Street. It is the same building that we were talking about, but to update to the 3rd Street as the street name. Language was also added to clarify that the center would only be open to those who are over the age of 18 and pets would not be allowed. And then updates were made to the contract. And using our standard templates, this is a different type of service than is typically contemplated. And so looking at removing, there's a restriction in our standard contract that for services that restricts subcontracting. Security services would be subcontracted by We Care, and so that we removed that to allow for that, as that'd be an expected type of service that would be subcontracted, to allow for that. Also removing the requirement that there's ownership of work product, and that since this is not a service that is providing a report or something of that nature, and then adding that it would be a 90-day termination if the city was to provide notice to terminate the contract. And so I am happy to answer any questions that council may have on this item.
Questions for Director Quintero? Okay, let's open it to the public.
Come on, Miss Maris.
Yeah, you start. Wait, do we have to call you We Care Program Turlock?
That's right. We wanted to use our formal name.
Okay, it's
right.
mouthy. I'll
If we
get
could
it.
subcontract with them for proofreading, we'd be
Yes.
in a good place.
The board, and there are two members of my board here tonight, and they have done an awesome job with proofreading. So, good evening, Mayor, council members, and the Turlock community. My name is Maris Sturdivant. I am the director of the We Care program. I have been working with the unhoused population for the past 30 years. I know. And We Care was incorporated as a nonprofit agency in 2003. I just want to give that information to some of the council members who are new and don't know too much about the We Care program, since we are mentioned here this evening. We Care has a commitment to helping the unhoused in any way that is practical and feasible. Our mission statement reads, We Care's mission is to provide transitional and emergency shelter, day center resources, and support services in collaboration with other agencies to assist homeless individuals in becoming self-sufficient. I just want to give a small rundown on the programs that we offer at this point. So we have our 49-bed shelter for men over the age of 18. We have permanent supportive housing that provides chronically homeless individuals or couples with long-term housing solutions. We are in the process of increasing that. So we have 5 units, and we are going to increase that to 7 units. This is through HUD money. We have rapid rehousing, which helps unhoused families move into a more sustainable housing situation, and we can help them from 6 months to 24 months. We have homeless prevention, which helps those who are at risk of becoming homeless. We're finding with the housing market here in Turlock, everywhere, that the rent is way above HUD's limit. So a better solution would be to stop that from happening before it happens. So we're working in that area. We also have our affordable housing that we received through the city. in Lambert and Park Street, and that is for low-income families. And so we have 6 units at this time. The pilot program that is being initiated and talked about tonight fits in well with our mission statement of having a day center resource, that we made that mission statement 20 years ago. So it only took 20 years to get to this point. So we appreciate the opportunity the council is offering us to be able to do that. So thank you.
Just don't retire.
I know, and don't say that.
She is entitled, but don't.
No, Ms. Maris.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Ron?
Okay. As Debbie Costello stated 2 weeks ago, we're getting conflicting messages from city staff. For example, the city attorney states he understands that it was made very clear Turlock residents do not want any more low barrier shelters, and then in the next breath proposes the city develop day centers so We Care and Turlock Gospel Mission can operate more like low barrier shelters. Do you even listen to what you tell us? We are told that the city must have more robust transitional housing and multiple day centers before our ordinances can be enforced. The proposed transitional housing facility will not be open before next summer. But this agenda item pays We Care to operate a day center starting June 1st. We Care would be paid to reach out to the homeless throughout our community to induce them to come to the day center. However, the day center will close at 3 p.m. and all those individuals will have nowhere to go until at least 7 p.m. And we know that many will refuse to stay at We Care, and since we still cannot enforce our ordinances, logically there would be an increase in camping around downtown for the next year. The day center will not be open on weekends, leaving the homeless that were induced to come to the downtown area to wander around during some of the busiest times for those businesses. This proposal, it seems, will bring more homeless to the downtown area without having a place for them to go at night. Since the transitional housing facility is not available, the ordinances cannot be enforced, which will only increase the amount of homeless in the downtown area during late afternoons, early evenings, and all weekend long for the next year. I ask our council members to reject this lunacy. Additionally, the city should tell us, in my opinion, what results have been achieved with the millions that have already been spent on transitional housing before you say there's a need for more. That includes the impact of the 4 properties the city still owns and the apartment complex on Park Street that the county is developing, which is a total of, if I counted right, 23 bedrooms, all for transitional housing. What are you guys trying to do? You're trying to destroy downtown? Bring more people downtown, don't have a place for them to stay or anything like that? How is that going to help? I could see if you were going to try to do this in a year when you actually had transitional housing, so that you could then also enforce your ordinances. But you can't enforce the ordinances now. Makes no sense.
Anyone else? Bill?
My back hurts tonight. I'm sorry, that's why I'm stumbling up here. But anyway, it's sad to me that there are people in the city of Turlock who resent people because they're homeless and because they have a mental illness. This is not a condition that they may have selected or chosen. It may have been a condition that they just were thrown into through their family upbringing, their family background. There could have been many different reasons for this. But to feel like we can't have people who are homeless in our midst, it's bothering. They don't bother me. I mean, I see them when I walk downtown. I'll say hello to them. Not everyone. If someone's acting crazy, I'm not going to go say hello to them. But if they're just walking down the street and they have carrying their baskets or bicycles. Some are very innovative. I mean, they have nice bicycles where they can carry a lot of materials with them and their personal belongings. And I appreciate the fact that they're trying to exist. I mean, they're in this terrible situation. And you don't know what the cause of that situation is. You don't know what started that situation. And you don't know if that situation isn't going to affect a relative of yours or a friend of yours, or you don't know. I mean, these are things that happen. This is reality. And there's nothing wrong with someone being homeless. We've had homeless people the entire history of mankind. It's not a new thing. And there was a person 2,000 years ago who thought it was very important to take care of the homeless. I won't mention his name, but I think you probably know who I mean. So I just don't understand this, this resentment of doing something for someone who need help. Wasn't that the whole point of this person who was here 2,000 years ago? Wasn't that what this person was talking about? Why are we so fearful of helping someone who needs help? It's just mind-boggling to me. And mental illness, people who are mentally ill cannot make rational choices or decisions. They need help. And I think that it's good of the council to approve something like this. It will give people help. And, you know, that may be what they need. We know we need more. We're working on that with the programs that have been introduced here recently. We're going in the right direction, and I hope this goes through. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll close the public comment, bring you back for some dialogue here.
I have a few questions now that the public has had a chance to talk. Regarding the green sheet, the edits, this program is not for people under 18, but, and maybe the folks that we care can help with this, but if there is an unhoused youth who comes, is there services that we can direct them to?
Yes, to the Center for Human Services, there's a youth navigation center they have in Modesto, and it's awesome. It's practically brand new, and it's an awesome place, and that's what they serve. It's just the youth up to the age of 20.
I see. And would there be a way to help people get there, or, you know, help them?
Transportation is another issue.
Yeah, okay. And then regarding the no pets, that's often a barrier in a lot of shelter situations. Is there a potential for including some kind of shelter, pet shelter in the future?
Can you come up to the mic so everybody else can hear
Thank
this
you.
listening? Thank you.
And it, you know, in discussion with Maris, as this is a 6-month pilot
Yeah.
program that she's working to roll out, the logistics of pets on the immediate were difficult. It's something that, you know, we've committed it to, as from the city, to work with We Care to see if there are ways down the road, if this is something that goes longer, to accommodate that. But this, as being a new service, we're trying to, you know, be realistic with what we can manage in the first.
Absolutely,
6
and
months,
well
but-
taken. And, you know, so I'm just hoping that we can,
Yeah, it is. It
Yeah.
is. I mean, men don't come to the shelter because we don't take anything but service animals. You know, I mean, if there's an animal. So it is a problem. We understand that. But, yeah, at this point, and if anybody questioned why it was at 3, is because at this point in time, until the kitchen is built, we use the same building for our dinner service. So our kitchen manager comes on at 4. And so we have to have time for a janitorial service to come in and clean the bathrooms before we do the dinner. So that's why it's closing at 3 in the afternoon instead of later. Perhaps when the kitchen is built and there's the PLHA money, whatever it is, that would be a different picture.
thank you very much. You know, there's been no, you can sit. I don't have any more questions for you. There's been a lot of hand wringing and opining about the Boise decision. And, you know, it's very hard for I think us as a city to have all the pieces in place to address all the needs that we have in our community. But this is a start. This is a place for people to go during the day. And the point is well taken that it ends at 3 o'clock, and I hope that in the future it can be a more full service situation, because we have inclement weather. It's starting to get really hot, and it is not fair for us to enforce ordinances with no place for people to go.
I have one question. How is the kitchen coming? Do you have any kind of timelines as to when it's going to be finished?
The plans are approved. The plans are approved.
Good job.
So,
6 years?
No,
just kidding.
gosh.
Just
No.
You know, construction has started. We did some inspections today on plumbing, but I don't, 6 to 9 months probably
Okay.
of construction potentially.
Well, that's that's good.
It's
That's a very good.
I'm completely estimating.
Progressive step. I'm
but
very happy about that.
There is movement.
Yeah, I agree. The hours I would love to see longer, but it's been a long time coming for our homeless community to have some place to go during the day. We can't expect that they're not going to be wandering around because there's no place for them to be. They need a place to be. So restrooms are there. We complain about them not having a restroom. Restrooms will be available all the day. So and internet and charging places, and then the navigation center will be on site. And so eventually I would love to see it open up on the weekends and in those after hours before the shelters open. But thank you guys for your efforts on this.
So the goal is by the time the 6-month pilot period is up, we have the kinks worked out. Miss Maris is going to promise not to retire, and she's going to be out there bossing those construction workers around every day, cracking the whip, getting that kitchen done so that everything can come full circle, because we do need this. My district needs this.
Katie, why not weekends? I mean, I get the 3 o'clock on the weekdays.
Sure. You know, it's a mix. The funding that is proposed from the successor agency, there is a limited amount that can be expended of up to $250,000. Some has already been expended, so there is a limited budget. And so adding in weekends then introduces additional staffing over time, so it would significantly impact the budget and the amount that we have available at this time for the 6 months. The longer-term goal of council desires is the PLHA funding, can also go for operation is, a different funding source that could then look at longer term. I think also with it being a pilot program for We Care, they're wanting to start in a way to work out the kinks and not take on too much before, we roll this out. So there will be data that is collected monthly that'll be included in the monthly council report so we can understand number of people that are visiting the center. So I think, the goal is to increase and expand services, but trying to, get there in a realistic manner of what kind of staffing levels and budget are available at this time.
I understand. I see what Ron's saying. In my mind, it seems logical that you do it all the days because the 100-degree weather could happen on a weekend and will. And so for me, it's a little bit of a start and stop, and it's unwarranted because there is, okay, I'm comfortable. I've been here Monday through Friday. I got somewhere to be. And then, okay, I don't want to go too far because I still want to be back in there. So I do see that as problematic. Other comments?
How many people can you accommodate during the day?
The occupant load of the building.
Chief, you awake? You good?
is over the building itself. Occupancy level is 275 people. So not to suggest that's the number that will be there, but
look,
physically that would.
Oh my no! Oh no! So 270.
To further on Mr. Bridegroom's concern, and we've got a place for you till 3, and then you got to be somewhere for 4 hours. They're not going to get over to Gear Road and back in 4 hours. I would like to see a plan, I mean, certainly a plan slash goal, realistic expectation for our community to know when we can expect a place for them virtually 24 hours a day.
Mr. Wilson, did you have something?
Mayor, I don't have an answer to Councilmember Bixel's question. What I wanted to note, though, was that there is a place for them to go. We have a shelter at the bus station for inclement weather people, so we have a cooling center and a heating center, depending on the time of year. I don't know how much that's used, but it is available, and we publicize that.
It wasn't used very much, and then we changed the bus route so that they could have transportation up to the Roger K. Fall Transportation Center. That increased the numbers a little bit, I'm told, but it is there. When it's 105 outside in the 4 o'clock afternoon heat, it is there.
Any other last comments? What is the will of council?
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Will you call the roll, please? Thank you, Ms. Quintero.
Councilmember Abram?
Yes.
Councilmember Bixel?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Franco?
Yes.
Councilmember Moniz?
Yes.
Mayor Bublak?
No, and it passes with a 4-1, and we will now take a 5-minute break or so to set up tables for just a budget discussion. Thank you all for being here. George. All right, we're gonna come back for a general fund budget workshop. Director Moreno, we can't hear you because Moniz is choking.
Sorry.
Okay, are you done? Are you done? Universal sign is this, just so you know. Okay, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and Council members. Tonight we have our proposal for the general fund budget for the fiscal year of 23-24. So as we start this process, we started it back in March 14th and basically sitting down with council and saying, what do you propose and what do you envision within this? What are our objectives and how we do that? So we heard that and actually took some notes and came back with a general list in which we saw as overview. And there was a lot of consensus, right? A lot of it was technology, websites, roads programs, and things of that nature. So some of the highlights were technology, obviously websites, roads, curb gutter, streetlights, and sidewalk, homelessness, and public safety. Some of these items, because they do have a general fund impact, we will talk about. Some will actually be refer back to you for other funds too as well. But we'll go through the funds that we have tonight, which were primarily our general fund items and which actually promote the majority of our services, right? So some of the highlights, which you'll see in the overall process, the first thing I'd like to note is we have a balanced budget. We've been going on a roll here, so we've been doing good. Thank you. So we do have a balanced budget of 52.1 million and some other funds in the roads program, which we'll talk about and we'll go into details. So some of the impacts within the general fund itself, we are seeing sales tax kind of flatten out for the next fiscal year, but we do project it to gain a little bit, which you'll see in my future presentation. We did have an accounting change in essence where we're now directly allocating expenditures for ARPA and Measure A directly into those funds. Why do we do that? Basically what you'll see and you look at the budget process, it gets confusing. You have transfers going all over the place and then you're asking the question, where does it all go, right? So this is a little more simplistic in the nature. The expense is where the expense needs to be. We're not looking for the money and moving it around. It's a little cleaner conversation. Yes, it's hard to gauge from 1 year when you do this accounting practice, but it is a better method on how we see the individual expenditures where they need to be expended. One action we did take and propose within this is to actually move some of the ARP fund approved positions, 2 of them, directly back into the general fund. So what I'm trying to accomplish with that is to phase those positions out. We can take action up till December 24. So we'd like to, in the next budget practice too, try to make that notion so that we come to the end of it in 26, we're not having to gobble up 8 positions total. So it's just me trying to wing us off of that. So I'm happy to be able to say we did still move those positions in, and there are no frozen positions. We are still fully funded for all the positions that were approved in the prior year. So through my budget process, we'll go through the nitty gritty of a little bit of the whole thing, but we do have a short slideshow for you to see. So within these topics, we'll talk about the general fund, UAL, because it's always a big topic, good and bad. Measure A revenues, we'll consolidate those as far as the roads program and the general, and also the reserves. So the first one is the general fund. So the general fund in nature is consumed of multiple services, charges for service, taxes, things of that nature. But as you can see from the slide, 80% of it actually comes from taxes, primarily from property tax and sales tax, which is not uncommon for a general city. The only time you really see a swing from these 2 other components is when you have a large tourism component, like a Monterey, things of that nature, where you're having massive increases in TOT and things of that nature. So this is pretty standard overall. So looking at our standard projection of sales tax, and we do have a consultant, we use Avenue Services, which is one of the primary vendors out there that does these projections. So what you'll see is kind of a flatten out coming in the next fiscal year, but they do on average see about a 3.5% gain in the next fiscal years after that. So kind of a flatten out in the sense of what we've seen, but we still do project to see coming up. So general fund expenditures, no shocker, the largest component of the whole thing is going to be salaries and benefits. Again, not abnormal for the general fund. The only time you see this kind of flop is within municipal services, where primary capital is the biggest expenditure, not labor. So this is pretty standard for what you'll see in municipal finance. Unfunded liability. So this is always a topic I like to bring to the forefront. It's a large topic that we need to talk about. It's a large topic in which we'll look to address in the future too, when we start talking about our reserve policies and what that looks like. So what is the unfunded liability? In summary, basically what it is, We have a pension obligation with what we call the UAL. We have to pay that amount. We have to make our standard payments. We have to hit a benchmark of what that number looks like when PERS goes out to invest. If they don't hit that benchmark or they hit higher than that benchmark, that creates gains and losses. Those gains and losses are now spread over years, and that creates what we call the unfunded accrued liability. So within the fiscal year of what we're actually allocating for this year, if you look at this report, it actually looks very well. I mean, if you're over the 70% marker, you can see some small 100% fully funded. What that means is those are the smaller, actually, the PEPRA that are not very high overall. So those are good markers, but that's the good news. Now let's look at the bad news. So you can see within the 2021, you see that same number of 68.6. Now look at 22, what that number has now become. And the projected for 23 and what that number now becomes. So what happens is they've taken losses and they're not hitting their discount rate, what they're supposed to be hitting or project to be hitting within the year. So these do create issues for the city because that dollar amount is now passed on to us for our gains and losses. So it is a financial impact that we need to address, and we'll continue to discuss, and as well as how we talk about the reserve policy and how we address this. So don't fret, I do have some things that I'd like to discuss so we can get things in control, which all revolves around the financial reserve policy. Okay? Measure A. So just a quick projection, pretty much doing the same thing as what you saw for the sales tax for the general. You see a small spike in the beginning because that's just when it started overall, right? You only had a couple of months within that first year, so you see a spike where you're starting to see the whole thing come through. General fund reserves. So this is a sheet you've seen quite often. We've tweaked it over the time since I've been here to kind of get a little cleaner overall vision, our picture. But what you can see is from the fiscal year ending 22, a general reserve close to $19 million. I don't get too far into this and what that looks like because of the policy discussion we're going to have. But basically, the reserve policy, which we're talking about tonight, you're going to see a glimpse of what that policy looks like. But we do have a healthy reserve. Basically, when it comes to reserve, you need to have a balance. One, to protect you from the future, but also you need to be able to take that money and pay down obligations or take care of things so that you're not accruing future costs. You want to be able to flatten that bell curve of whatever those expenditures, whether it's debt, UAL, or whatever it may be, take care of one-time costs that come up, which your general fund doesn't have to take that impact. Okay? Any questions on those short slides?
Yeah, you're talking about the general fund, and then you're talking about reserve. So in Measure A, we put money towards to make sure that it goes up enough to whatever percent that is. Mm-hmm. That wouldn't be something that we would use towards the PERS, correct?
So my proposal is going to be with the general fund and the policy itself. We've now hit a marker where I believe we have a sufficient fund, which I see as a benchmark of 20%. What I'd like to propose at a future meeting is take that 10% of Measure A, actually pay down our UAL. And so what that does, it doesn't obligate us to do that every year. We'll have a formal conversation each year about it, because what I want to be able to do is have that flexibility. What are we looking at the end of the year? We've seen a dip. Okay, well, let's pull that back and pull that and make sure that our general fund is staying at that 20%. Are we okay? Are we sufficient? Okay, let's make that payment and flatten that bell curve overall. And I'll explain that by going backwards. So you can see that large bell curve and what that looks like. We're going to get a spike in the future years because of what's occurring. So the best thing you can do, and just my formal practice, flatten that bell curve out, right? Let's get through that hump so that PEPRA can kick in. Now, there's other options which you can do. You can pay down the long term and save a lot on interest. But from my perspective, if you flatten that curve, you can ride out and get to where PEPRA kicks in. So that's what we'll propose at a later time.
Okay. Questions, Fred?
Okay, we'll transition to more of the formal budget process. There is one more slide that will tie into a different conversation, but we'll now get into the details.
Uh-oh. How the sausage is made. Nadine, you up?
Nice to see you. Where you been? Hiding. I'm hiding.
Pushing numbers.
Downstairs.
Pushing the pencil. Exactly.
So just to give a better understanding of the process that I do, 3 of you have been through it. We're just going to go through the book. We're basically what you see is a kind of a status quo overall book. You have your increases to labor and some other factors, but really what you're looking at is the augmentations. What is being proposed that we see as brand new programs, expenditures, over and above what they've normally seen. So when I say, hey, this department really has no intake, they may have an increase in their costs, but largely it's going to be because of salary increases, MOU increases, standard operating cost increase, okay? So let's start through the book. So page 1 basically represents what your overall categories for each department and what the revenues are. So you can see, again, a balanced budget of 52.1 on both your revenues and expenditures.
Director Moreno, can I ask a question?
Sure.
About questions. Would you like us to hold our questions
No,
until the
jump
end
right in.
or in the section that we're in?
Jump right in because I'm going to talk fast. I usually do. Stop me at any chance if you have a question because as you can see, this is a couple inches thick, and then if we don't, we'll be here all night. So, yeah, just jump right in because as long as right when I'm in that topic, it's better because we can identify it and go through it. So please stop me if I go too fast. Okay.
Okay, page 2. I got a question.
Oh, here we go.
On page 2, you have at the very bottom under 110, there's penalties, return check charges, which is $500,000. What are we doing wrong? How can we fix it?
Well, return check process is really about people that are giving us checks and bouncing. There's really nothing you can do to control that. So we send, basically right now, the only thing we can do is actually make sure that we're collecting that money is the best thing we can do. Return checks is just a part of any type of POS system. Any kind of sales system, you're going to have it. Unfortunately, checks are still there. So even debit and credit cards are still starting to tick up. We still have a large part of the community that still want to bring in a check, so you're going to have it, unfortunately.
But we can have more versatility with how people pay in the future?
Correct. So we are looking at expanding what our POS system does from our New World system and having that conversation with IT now to create more efficiency on the payment side too as well. So that we can create, it's going to go hand in hand, not to get too far into the conversation with the website and how that operates too. So that whole website process is really going to revamp how we do utility payments too as well and create more efficiencies. Right now it can get a little commingled and muddled up on that website. So we're going to create streamlines within the new process and actually change how our POS system works so that it's directly tied into New World so we can do those things.
Nick is shaking his head, so you're accurate.
Yeah, thanks. He's excited about the website too, don't worry. So within this is your general department. Well, this is where your tax and property tax in. So we talked about sales tax and what that looks like already. For the property tax, we're actually proposing a 6% increase. So we're seeing a large gain within that, and that information comes from the county.
And that was the change in our agreement with the county?
That change has already taken place. We're seeing that substantial growth this year, which greatly helped. We actually look to be right on track for that number. So no, that's just the agreement that they're expecting for the next coming year.
Cool.
So largely what controls that is building, permitting changes and things of that nature, where your structures, the residentials are getting revamped and re-evaluated. So that continues that page. So we will move forward. So past the T000s, we'll go into the other departments. So these are general revenues for police, fire, code enforcement, things of that nature. What we do is we sit down with every single department, we look at our revenues. I'm very particular, Nadine laughs at me because we go through every line. What does it look like? What is it doing? Why is it spiking? Why is it not? Okay, that's a little bit low, let's bring that up. So that's just kind of the process. So when we look at these things, we are going line by line and being realistic with our revenues, right? Because if we are too conservative, we impact services. If we are overly, spike that number up, we end up having to backpedal. So we really want to find that sweet spot overall.
Director Moreno, a question on just the accounting of the code enforcement. I'm sure this has to do with how code enforcement has moved from one department to the next, but where, if it's not under the 220 category anymore, where is it? If that makes sense.
So it has moved to 205. Yeah, this is just a transition. PD is actually not necessarily restructured, but created depths within their chart, so they now have 3 sets within their overall PD department. So that's why you're seeing that shifting and moving to manage or to be set under their managers appropriately. Any other questions regarding revenues within the general fund? As you can see, the property tax and everything is the primary component. So going through these, you have your planning, services and things of that nature, but they're pretty consistent. You are seeing some growth, but not large overall from what you've seen in the past.
Can you do us a favor and just say the page number that you're on whenever you're on it?
Sure.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm kind of skipping because some of them are not very material. So right now we're actually going into the end of it because we've gone through a primary services. We're at page number 9, where all you're really seeing is our youth services and programs for recreation. So a lot of these programs are funded through fees that we collect, or also they're using grants and things of that nature too. So you'll see those components coming in here. So that brings us into page number 10, where you see your overall revenues. Not a lot there, obviously, because it kind of condenses into the primary funding sources. You see a lot of small increments that come in, so we can manage that. But that, again, brings us to the bottom line of 52.1 in total revenues for the general fund. Is there any questions regarding the general fund and its revenue stream? Okay. Your next page is your overall, what we call reserves, kind of see what that number looks like and where it's going. I won't spend time on this. We've already talked about it, generally where it's at, almost about 19 million within the general fund itself. What you'll see as part of the change, and when we talk about the reserve policy, the compensated absences will collapse that. The resolution for 2011 for the 6.5, we'll collapse that into one number, and a percentage will consolidate into that 19 million to make it more of a formal policy and practice of what you'll see for standard reserve practice.
Just, why are we still pending an audit from 21?
So the audit right now is in the final stages. We're waiting for one last component. We have the drafts, we have the information. We're just waiting for that final step. We're working on the other audits to get them caught up. We have had a lag due to staffing shortage, but we do have a new principal accountant who primarily focuses on that, is really just nailing down and trying to pound that out. Okay. So within the process, we talked about proposed funding and unfunded augmentations. What an augmentation is, again, just to kind of redefine it, departments will sit down with them. They'll have a request primarily outside their norm, so that we'll try to track that. What happens is when we're starting to look at, and we're on page 12, when we're starting to look at the augmentations, we'll take that and say, okay, we don't want to cut services. We know what we currently have to do. Directors and staff have come to their resolution of, okay, I need to do this. This is what I need for my services to be able to do operations. The augmentations are expansions on that, right? So within the overall augmentation list, we have approved in the general fund 783,000. When we first came to all the augmentations and gobbled them up, we were about 2.7 in the hole. So you can see the augmentation, how that comes into play, and how we really need to take a hard look at what that looks like. So we're happy to say that we're able to approve some of the augmentations, but obviously we can't take it all on. And that's, again, not abnormal. It really isn't. So directors and staff will come in with the numbers and the information they'd like to provide programs, and then we turn around and have another conversation on how we get the whole thing balanced. Okay? So through the rest of the expenditures, what we'll do, we'll sit down and talk about some of those augmentations within the departments as they come up. And then the ones that we don't have augmentations, we'll pretty much just say this is status quo overall budget. But if there's a line item that you'd like to talk about, please stop me. So we'll now move on to page number 18. So page number 18 is City Council. City Council has a standard overall budget. They do not have an augmentation at this time, so that means pretty much the impacts and services that they currently have are the same status quo that they had in the previous years. And a majority of that's really just training and things of that nature, and their standard allocations. So moving on to the city managers on page 20. This one does have an augmentation, total augmentation within the budget that is proposed. Again, proposed means it is currently in the budget. So you have some, let me get that list. So keeping in mind that within the city manager's budget, there is multiple directors too as well. So some of it is for economic development and some other services and training they utilize. The primary one within this, the one that actually drives that cost factor though, is going to be the request for the only position that is actually within the current budget that is proposed as new. So this position is proposed as a management analyst to assist with grants and federal, state, and local overall, so we can apply and get that management of the overall services. And there is also a component within there to assist with homelessness and the activities that go around along that. Is there any questions around that position?
So this position is already funded?
It is funded within, it is proposed and
budget.
therefore it is budgeted, correct.
I'd just like to make a comment that I'm really glad to see that we could, I know this was something that was brought up at the dais in March, and I'm really glad that to see this in the proposed budget and funded because, having this individual in this position is going to make it easier for us to get more money to do more things and provide better service for our residents.
So I think this position kind of hits two-pronged approach. One is, make sure we're getting grants, right? That's the free money. Try to get the low-hanging fruit, but also go for swinging for the fences for the big ones. It also hits that homeless component, which is one of the critical goals and objectives that you guys had during the visioning session. So I think it hits multiple avenues in that sense of the way.
What page you on?
I was on page 20. 20 through 21 is the actual budget. The augmentations follow through that all the way through 27 was all the augmentations for that department.
Okay, just feedback on the 110K. I'm not interested in paying that much money for a person to do that. So
Okay.
I'm sure that Mr. Wilson can find a moderate amount of money to get people to help us get that, but
So we did have some previous conversations prior to this meeting on what that looks like. Talking to the human relations director about maybe partnering with the college. Maybe some joint venture in that sense of the way, where we can actually have somebody on staff, pay them as they go through the proposal. So we are evaluating that. So we can bring back some options on what that looks like and what that cost factor looks like too as well. So when we come back to talk about the general fund, we'll come with a proposal on what that looks like, if that's the direction that you'd like us to do.
understood. Thanks.
Okay. So moving on. The next department we'll be looking at is the city clerk and the general fund. That's page 28.
Sorry, can I go back actually to page 25?
You sure can.
There is, maybe I'm not talking about 25. I'll hold my comment for later.
Okay. So, no, not a problem. So again, going into the city clerk, there is an augmentation for that department. Not very large. It is for $25,000. It's primarily for expansion on part-time help. So again, she had a budget originally. It's just expanded on it. So it's not new. It's just making sure we have the appropriate hours for the staffing that we need on our part-time side of how we do things. Okay.
Makes sense.
Finance, the heart and soul of the city.
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
So right now, basically what happened, within this department, it's for the most part status quo. We do have an augmentation for reclassification for one of my employees, basically the supervisor, moving into a manager position. I've revamped that structure and how that department works. Really got it into, right now she's working on the procurement policy and updating it. So taking more of a manager role, she's actually assisting with staff reports and actually drafting ordinances. She assists with some of the ones I've been dealing with recently. So really taking that position and putting it where it needs to be so that it can assist me so that I can do the things that I need to do too. Okay. The other augmentation is just for travel and training. We now almost full staffed, so we're trying to get more training. Same as all my directors that work with me, training is very critical. It doesn't matter what department you're in. If you're not getting training, then you're stagnant, and you're really not keeping up to date. Okay. Moving on, we're to the city attorney's department. We do have augmentations for that. And that's just $50,000. General contract services, an increase to augment. It's really for conflict of interest is really what it's about. right? So we do have to have an attorney when some conflict comes up for a current city attorney. So it's just good to make sure we have that when those matters come up. Seeing no questions, we'll move on. Human relations. Human relations,
What
let's
page?
see.
39.
39, sorry. I don't see any augmentations for this department overall, so therefore it is kind of a status quo budget. Starting standard labor, again, all positions that were currently approved are still within this department. Page 43, general services. General services within this department is not a typical overall apartment. It's really a kind of a catch-all. So when we need to take an allocation, for example, we have an individual that works for kind of for Muni, but is actually general services within City Hall. It allows us to take that dollar amount and spread it out to all the other departments as well. So this is more of a catch-all in a sense of the way. So you'll see some labor, but you'll also see some general expenses. And again, basically what we're doing is catching it, spreading it out because you can't really define it into one.
Get your transfers out.
Correct. An augmentation for that one. We did have, have an augmentation for that department, only for $10,000. What it is we have, are proposing, again, going back to our goals and objectives, social media outlet, what you're seeing an augmentation for 10,000 only because that's getting chopped up and spread to all departments. So you're gonna see it in the muni budget, you're gonna see it in the general department, but it's really focused on, sorry? Oh. So yeah, you'll see that number get spread around to multiple funds, general, non-fund general, and also transit.
I have a comment on that.
Yeah.
I hear and I share this council's desire to be more present on social media, engage with the public. I'm a little concerned that having a contract position that's focusing solely on social media is not going to give us what we want. I really think we need somebody here who can work among our department directors, and working on our internal communication, working on our external communication, not just in social media, but in the different ways that we need to communicate with people, because I'd love to see us have an app. Not all of our residents are on social media, and even if they are, it's a super noisy place. So I would really like to see this be more tailored to what we need, which is someone who can be on staff in-house and kind of look at the more global perspective of communications.
I like it. Totally like that.
Okay. So yeah, we'll take those notes and we'll come back with the budget and show you how we adjusted that.
I think for that dollar amount, we could definitely get somebody that could work under our director of communications, and really do a good job for looking at all of the aspects of communication.
Okay.
And I think we pretty much ousted ourselves from having contracts with the increase in insurance, so we put ourselves in that position right there.
Okay, we'll come with a proposal. Thank you. Moving on, you'll see on page 49, this is an old department. So what you'll see in some of these is a lot of zeros outs because we're moving stuff around. This department's no longer needed. This is back in the high times of the COVID era where we wanted to actually identify what those costs look like, primarily to submit them for FEMA reimbursement though. So there's really no allocated expenses within this department. So in the general fund, or in the page number 51, we do have the homeless response. A lot of this is geared around services, but also cleanups. So when public safety needs to go out and clean stuff up, a lot of this is regarding around that. So we'll transition now to page number 53. This is the beginning of Measure A. That is not the end of the general. The way the booklet is broken up is in compartments. So you have your admin and you break it down into different ones. Actually, me and Nadine were talking about a little more revamping of how that looks and consolidating just a general fund. So we're not hopping all over the place like this. But as you can see within my process and me and Nadine working together, you'll see tweaks of the budget every year. It's going to change. It's going to fluid, not as a number statement perspective, more of a an organizational statement on how you do things, getting things where I think they need to be and taking those steps forward, just to get the information. Exactly. A prime example is the transfers in and outs. Like, where do you go with all this? My best practice, what I've done for transfers out, it is a part of doing business and how you do this, but I actually had a separate sheet just for that, so you can see the flow and where it all goes. And so that's one of the things we're talking about right now and getting that done. Okay? So this is going to transition into Measure A. Measure A is this, in Fund 115 is our roads program overall. So remember, we allocate 50% of Measure A. We allocate it directly to this fund. We broke it apart because we want to see all the expenses just for that program all by itself, because it is almost a standalone. Although it is the same funding source as the general, it has different activities and rolls around the whole thing. So primarily what you'll see is the revenue stream coming in. The largest factors, you're going to see the construction, which is all taking place and about to go to fruition with the actions that you took tonight on the consent calendar. Is there any questions around Measure A in the roads program and the budget itself on page 53?
In regard to our percentages, I actually like to push it to 55% on roads if we can. As we look at what we're gonna do with roads, I think that makes the most sense, and especially if we're gonna kind of taper back with achieving our reserve. And I think it makes more sense to make sure we're hitting that mark, and if we have to bond for any reason, it'll be lessened by that. That's just a suggestion. I don't know what anybody else is thinking.
55%, but that 5% would come from like the 10 that's already going to the general fund reserve, or in?
No, that would be, what page is the rest of the Measure A on? I think the 5% would come out of that. Well, she says.
61?
She wants 5%.
61.
Page 61. Good job, Nadine.
She's awesome. Okay, so. What's our bottom line?
So looking at we're jumping around, but it's fine.
Sure.
So page 61, we're looking at the Measure A, and that's the general, what we call Fund 118. So again, you see the 50%, you see the allocation going out to the general fund, and you see all those zeros, but you see the direct allocation expense.
Right.
The overall bottom line for that fund was a gain, I want to say, of about $100,000.
127, yeah, it's on page 69.
So we can definitely, within the reserve, so what we're going to do is the reserve policy we're going to talk about, but we're also going to talk about Measure A again, having that same conversation. So we can talk about that piece and what that looks like and how that'll impact switching 5% and moving it around and what it looks like financially. Because it'll need to be switched if we are going to use any increment within Measure A for the policy itself. We'll have to make an action on that. So we can definitely have that conversation prior to any adoption of this budget. Okay?
Where are we at on the general fund reserve being close to 20%? So
we're past it. 20%. So you have a budget right now of 52.1,
okay.
Which is slightly over 10 million. You're close to 19.
Okay.
So
that works. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's not 20%.
10?
We're gonna get there, but we're gonna get there.
We'll spend it down.
And we're gonna need to get there with unfunded liabilities and curving that.
Yeah,
first
so
curve to get to Pembroke.
yeah, so it's just the general fund. So you have a 20% marker, which is about 10%. So we're past that, way past that. So really, what's about, okay, how do we manage this appropriately? Having a large reserve is a good thing, but there are also worries where it works against you.
There's also
because you're not taking care of obligations that you should be taking care of. That, like I said, flattening that bell curve so that we can sustain it and ride that wave out through. Okay.
Got it. All right, are we going backwards or forwards now? I'm at 61.
You're jumping all over, look at you. So we'll go back a little bit. We ended at 53. We'll go into the next one, which is 54. Basic overall fund, public safety. There is some expenditures there. Some of it's coming out. It's just an overall sales tax component, which comes into here as far as legislation. This is just an action that they took. So we received the money, we allocated it to general expenses, and then it gets transferred out to other programs to be utilized. So that was on page 54. Moving on to cannabis. So cannabis is a conversation I want to kind of, sorry.
Moving back to page 55.
Mm-hmm.
There's a line item that got my attention. Fire station maintenance, $600 or, well, that was, excuse me, this, I mean, there's nothing.
So fire station maintenance, this is a general overall activity. We're going to have a conversation about some of the maintenance that needs to be done at the fire stations when we get into the unfunded obligations. So typically what I want to do in the budget process, and I know we're kind of tangent here a little bit, but I'll explain it all kind of tie in, right? So yes, you have a small amount here. Yes, they have some maintenance they need to do. Really what they have is some larger maintenance that we need to address, which was brought in during the augmentation process, but due to funding restraints, we can't fund everything, right? So what we do in the budget process, we say, okay, this is where we're at. I don't like to throw everything in there. I like to be able to get the balanced budget, come to council, and let's have a conversation about those other ones and potential other funding sources. Instead of pre-identifying things like that, I'd rather have a conversation with you. So yes, that's a small amount, but there are some obligations or some requests that would actually like to talk about funding. So we can actually have that conversation when we get to Measure A for Fund 18 when we get back to page 62.
62.
Okay? So again, this is a general one. Yes, it is small. There's not a lot of money that comes in here, is really why that's so small. So you're going to see some maintenance stuff in their general fund, and this is just their, their backup plan in which they need to do things. Okay? So going to cannabis. Cannabis, you can see the revenue stream is kind of flattened out a little bit overall, although we do have projections of a new site coming in on page 58. So on page 58, we do have a kind of a flat number overall, but we do project that something may be coming in next year. But when it comes to development, unless you're getting closer to it, I really can't build it into the budget. It's more of a hypothetical until they get a little bit closer. Development's a tricky little wicket when you're budgeting, right? I mean, they be going full steam with 100 miles an hour and then turn around and say, I need to come back a little bit. So you don't want to go too far into it and build it into the budget. The reason I like to talk about this one is because of Columbia Pool.
We don't have the third cannabis dispensary programmed in with.
No, only the two that are currently operational.
Okay.
So if we do get the other one coming in, we'll definitely have a major conversation and bring that new number in if we do start to collect.
Okay. Aren't they supposed to be online soon?
I don't have a start date. Maybe Director Quintero, do you have anything? We're working through the process.
Thank you.
And what were you going to say about my Columbia Pool?
Columbia Pool. So cannabis, this fund itself has been a primary component of funding Columbia Pool. Talking to the directors on where the project is and what that funding source is. We've been very open in saying it's not fully funded at this time. Right now within this fund, you do see a gain within the financial statement itself of about $1 million. I'd like to make a request that we actually identify that now and put that aside. I don't believe it's going to fully fund it, but I think it's a large chunk that we need to identify now, so that we're setting that aside and having a bigger conversation of what that gap looks like when we get there.
So moved.
You stop right now.
Anybody want to join me?
You're out of order.
So basically what I'm saying is either we're going to ask now or we're going to ask later. We're eventually going to come back and ask. We might as well just have the conversation.
How close does that bring us to full funding?
So I talked to Eric today and this week about it. Their preliminary projections were about 2.2 short.
Okay. All right.
So obviously this will get us a large chunk of the way through.
Okay.
Those are preliminary estimates. We have not gone to bid.
Got some
We're
ideas for
not
that.
there yet.
Some ideas for
So that, and Eric specifically said that is a high number,
Yeah.
right? I mean, so we need to start there and we work our way down.
So Eric's being conservative with that number.
No, Eric, that's a high number. So he's saying we can work that number is what he's saying. So, I mean, it's better to start,
Get to the grind, Eric. Start grinding.
Sharpen that pencil.
get that red pencil out. So,
Red pen.
I have a question for clarification. So that extra $1 million in the cannabis fund is also including the diversion and education budget as well? So are you're proposing to move that into Columbia
that budget's
Pool?
already there and been allocated for the diversion program, the revenue streams and the budget they need to run the services that they're looking to propose in the coming year. So that's not being impacted whatsoever. We're not diverting that revenue stream whatsoever.
Okay, I guess I don't understand then how it's adding up, because it looks like the diversion and education spans page 58 to 59.
So
And
what I'm
then-
referring to is if you look at the bottom line at the net gain, so they're budgeting for that money to come in for the diversions of the 0.25, I believe it is. You can see that. Where's it at?
Is it because that's a totally different fund? That's 161
Oh.
versus 117?
This is just.
Got it.
Yeah. It's broken into different sections.
What's the
Yeah.
percentage on diversion?
We're on page 58 still, it's the top section. So they're referring to, council member, is that we have segregation in a sense of the way. You have a division 190, which is just the as a component, but you also have the diversion in education, which is on the bottom of the page of 58, program 161. Okay. So is there any proposal? Would you like to see that in the next budget to us to put whatever number of the difference in Calamity Pool?
I would like to see that.
Yes, I would like to see that.
I'm in agreement.
It seems like a consensus, so we'll go ahead and we'll do that action. Again, we're gonna ask for it now, we're gonna ask for it later, but we're gonna come back and ask for it. So, okay, we'll move us on from cannabis. Measure A general. Measure A general, as we talked about, we do have a healthy reserve. You can see it.
Page 60?
61.
Sorry, page 61.
What about the augmentation request on page 60?
So that's the augmentation, but this is for the LPRs. This is actually, it's an augmentation, but actually a continuation of a contract. So we executed a contract for PD for this LPR program, this camera system. This is actually just a continuation of that contract. So it's an augmentation in the sense of the way it's an increase, because we haven't incurred that first initial 100, but it's actually just taken on and moving forward with that contract. So it's technically not new, it's just a larger amount and it sticks out, so we like to refer to it. So again, going into Measure A, let's go back a little bit.
61?
Page 61. So looking at your reserves, you can see we do have healthy reserves within the general Measure A fund, close to $6 million. What I'd like to propose actually is to go back to our unfunded augmentations. There is a couple that I'd like to say is one-time expenditures. Some of the repairs, there's repairs to the firehouses that are in there, and there's the actually vehicle request from PD. When we're going to reserves, obviously as your finance director, I don't want a continuous expense. I mean, that's setting yourself up into a bad sample. You want to look to one-time numbers. So with that healthy reserve, I am proposing that we bring in some of those augmentations for the fire station, for both fire stations, as well as the PD. So basically the re-roofing, one of them's for $225,000. Fire station, again,
Just wait.
it's
Yeah.
2 roofs, and yeah, the bid has actually come in, and that's what the number is. I said the same thing. Yeah.
As a general
I just saw the
contractor,
staff. I just
that's
saw the staff.
outrageous.
report.
It's outrageous.
Yeah.
I shook my head.
Shingles.
too.
Which fire stations?
30,
Hi, Chief.
32.
How you doing?
32 and 34.
32 and 34.
No, not 4. 32,
32 and 33.
Yeah.
Like, are they lining it in 24 karat gold?
Oh, just wait.
Just platinum.
Just wait, because then 34 gets new bathroom, new kitchen.
Yeah, new bathroom is
250,000.
actually cleaning up the interior, critical repairs
Yeah,
for
and
dry
it's a-
rot, 2 bathroom, and updates in kitchen.
As a general contractor, I could build a house for 250,000 for a 2,100 square foot house.
So
I just put a roof on a 6,000 square foot building, $31,000. I'm sorry.
So, did we?
We had a discussion with the city manager with potentially looking at hiring our own GC, general contractor, to work in in our staff, and that then possibly looking at the temporary help as their laborers, etc. So we could do some of these things ourselves. A GC could very easily do the repairs and maintenance on a lot of our buildings, and we may be able to save some money that way. So the city manager is going to be talking.
Even a 960 would be a beautiful thing for just to get that done.
So the nice thing about this, obviously, we're having a conversation about some of these augmentations, but because I'm proposing to go to Measure A General, we could have further conversations at a later date. So we don't have to take action and propose this. If there's concerns, we'll follow up with additional details and how we can, see what's going on here to make you comfortable with some kind of action.
I'd be comfortable using a couple million to finish the pool.
So, and don't
Is
get
that
me
a second?
wrong, I
You
don't
want a
wanna,
second?
I don't wanna put my fire chief over here under the impression we don't want him to get his roofs. We want that, but that number is alarming.
Yeah.
That is very alarming.
Don't put Santa on top of there,
You're
just
not
just
gonna-
saying.
you don't care that I just said put money in the
So,
pool.
Yes, and everything should be put into
Yeah.
the pool until it's fully funded, just a caveat.
so again, I did see the bid, and even me and Chief both said, "What the?" So
That's pretty bad.
we'll take a hard look at it, and we'll come
We'll
back.
find
on
the
it
right
later.
amount of money and get it fixed for you.
So paper shingles. That's it. Sorry.
Puff and I puff.
So
Okay.
that's one of the requests. The other ones, again, were for PD. So we had some Sprinter vans, I believe, and some other vehicles in there.
Can we go back to that Sprinter van?
Yeah, we definitely can.
Purpose,
Page?
please?
And now for that, I'll turn over to Chief.
Page.
The Sprinter van is to support our drone team. We've been very successful with that unit since it's been deployed. At last time I checked, they had over 50 deployments, 10 apprehensions, makes the environment safer for our people. So the idea is to catch up with some of the other agencies, like the Sheriff's Department, I believe, has 3 or 4 of them deployed out in the field. They have video screens. They're able to help us monitor a number of situations. So that's kind of the idea behind that. It can also function as an additional light-duty command vehicle for us.
Thank you, Chief.
So we have a couple of requests, one for 125,000, that is the van. Another for 260 for 4 vehicles equipped for watch commanders, and that's fully equipped. And then another one for the evidence staff for 35,000. Is that something council would like to see built into the reserve, or further discussion at a later date? Spent from reserve, basically. $240,000.
So we don't have any vehicles for your staff right now?
And when you say watch commander, what is that? Is that a lieutenant? Is that a sergeant? What is that?
On duty?
That's our lieutenant. We currently don't have vehicles equipped for watch commanders. With the reorganization, we did a redeployment of the lieutenants. We're transferring them into field service, so they're functioning as true watch commanders. They're driving vehicles like a Ford Fusion. That doesn't meet our needs. They have one vehicle allocated that's a marked patrol unit to share between the 5 lieutenants, typically 4 assigned to field operations. So what we're going to do is transfer the marked lieutenant watch commander vehicle to a field sergeant, and then we're looking to purchase vehicles for the lieutenant watch commanders, so they're equipped with all the gear and equipment that they need, that they can deploy out into the field with.
So they're not gonna share them?
No, they're all on duty at the same time.
All watch commanders at the same time?
4 watch commanders, lieutenants. So their days are staggered out, but there is days during the week where they're all working at the same time.
Are these cars going home with anybody?
No, they won't be.
Are there cars going home with watch commanders now?
Yes, they take the car home while they're on call, and I believe there's another lieutenant that's taking a car home as well. So 2 of the 4.
Other questions?
Okay, so we'll gather some more information and get you some details a little more on that, and give a formal presentation, and we can kind of go from there. So, given that, I see unless there's any other augmentations that are not funded, you'd like to go to reserves for.
Can we talk about something real quick? So,
We sure can.
you said at the very beginning that we don't have any frozen positions.
Well,
Is it a
all our
different terminology?
frozen positions, that we have a couple that are frozen, but we're not funded. The reason they're not funded is because our format in which we're structured are not ready for those positions. So what I'm referring to is all the positions that we currently have approved, all the positions from the reorganization are fully funded. So therefore, we didn't cut back, we didn't freeze any other positions. Those are positions that have been discussed with the directors. They're just not ready to bring those positions in yet, due to wherever they need the staffing levels and training to be. Some of it's in engineering, some in PD. So I've had those conversations with those directors.
So for me, I feel as if it's really difficult for us to hire police. And I would rather take some of the money, and I know there's 3 frozen positions, come up with some mechanism to hire, whether it's CSO or Explorer, whatever, getting them on the path to becoming cops, but also lightening the load where they can to help so that we actually are more efficient. I'd love to see what the chief could come back with in relation to that, just so we're trying to think outside the box and get things done and more efficient for our community and our responses.
Okay. Yeah, we can definitely have a conversation with Chief and.
Yep.
Chief, you want me to address that?
Can you?
I think that's a good idea. I think recruitment is a challenge for us. It's a challenge for everybody in law enforcement. You're looking at Modesto PD with 20 open positions, Madera PD with 11, Merced 8, Las Banas 6, Turlock 8. And we're all pulling from the same pool of applicants. We're looking, there's just a handful of academies up and down the valley that feed us. And then you have a number of people who attend the academy and they can't even pass a law enforcement background investigation or get through the psych and medical portion. So it's a finite pool. We've been very successful. I like the idea of, you said CSOs, that's a full-time position for us. I would say our cadet program, we've been very successful with that. We have 2 currently in the FTO program. They're getting ready to panel out of the second phase of the program. They are 2 former cadets for us. We're currently funded at 4. It's roughly $71,000 a year for those positions, and 4 more would be another $71,000 added to that. If we could get there, I think it would make staff really happy. Because we've had a lot of success with
it would be
cadets.
temporary. You're not, those positions are like, you want them to be full officers someday, but I don't know how else you get that if you don't start somewhere.
Yeah, we'd have to look at like underfilling the positions if we went there. I'm currently at 8 vacancies. If we brought on the 3, that would put us at 11 vacancies. I'm still having a hard time feeding the 8. So I think the best path is for me to talk to Isaac and let's come up with a plan, see what we can do, and come back and present it to you.
Fair enough.
All right. That concludes Measure A for Fund 118 from page 61. So we will continue on. So that fund actually goes all the way through pretty far, 69. So our next fund that we'll be discussing is the American Rescue Plan Act. As we said in the beginning, we've already transitioned 2 positions out of there, pulling it back into the general fund. We'll have another conversation next budget cycle to continue down that trend, so that when we do get to the end, we are not gobbling that whole thing up. Just a reminder about this organization, we still do have funds available. So when we get to December 31st, or prior to December 31st of 24, we need to have it obligated, okay? But we need to have expended by December 31st of 26. So we have some time. Obviously some projects that come up that we can utilize these things. Maybe it's Columbia Pool, maybe we're going to Measure A for Columbia Pool. When it comes to Columbia Pool, just to finish that statement overall, because we don't know that number yet. I mean, we want to allocate that million to it because we know that's a need, but we don't know what that final number is yet. So when we get closer to it, we'll have another conversation and how we fix that problem.
Yeah, the mayor and I had a conversation with the city manager yesterday, and we have some ideas on the remaining ARPA money. Columbia Pool being number 1, and then police and public safety fire requests number 2, and then Pedretti Lights maybe number 3. But we have Firehouse Cannabis. They wanted to have another donation to the city, so we may want to check into that. Pedretti Lights with Firehouse.
Okay.
Anyway, that was
Look
our
at
conversation.
Eric perked up there. What money? What?
So when it comes to ARPA, whenever council's ready to have a conversation as a whole again, I'm happy to have that. Just make a formal request, and we'll have that. But that's something I think we're all kind of on the same page on what we're looking at in that sense of the way. It is still there. We do have time. So don't feel rushed. When you're ready to take some action on it, let me know and I can bring it back.
I was in DC last week, and there's some scuttlebutt going on about the House wants to pull back some of the ARPA monies that are unused. So, yeah, so we need to
There has.
have that conversation. But I mean, who knows? I don't really believe that they would do it, but there's talk about it.
I think it'd be a large haul to claw that money back from the communities that are currently trying to utilize it. But yeah, I mean, I've been hearing this for a little while. So I mean, there's nothing I can't predict it, right? That's above where I'm sitting. That's in the legislation end, so they do what they do, and we react, and we go from there. But yeah, that's not an unforeseen conversation. They are having them. So it is a potential liability out there that if we don't spend these funds, I don't want to say in the short term, but at some point start obligating this out so that we don't get into that.
Right. Yeah, they're having the discussion, so we have a little time, but I would hate to gamble with 2.6 million that
I don't
they're
disagree.
not going to do the pullback.
Yeah, we don't want to be in the position where we're giving money back.
And regarding those unallocated funds, we have to obligate them by the end of 24 and spend them by 26.
Correct.
So even though, I mean, that's not that far away for us. So
That's correct.
I would like to see us have that conversation on what we can do with it, because there's no sense in sitting on something that if losing it is a potential.
Okay. Yeah, so we can have a conversation in the short term about the whole thing. Definitely. Okay. Okay, so within the expenditures, again, direct allocations for the things that have already been approved. You can see that I have a spreadsheet that tracks the whole thing. I put that document out many times to the public and to the council. If anybody wants a refresher on what that looks like, especially with the change in the salaries, I'll be happy to provide it. Just full disclosure on the whole thing so the public knows and council knows. We take no action without you. Okay? So moving forward from the American Rescue Plan, we now come back into the general fund. So the first department's going to be on page 73. This is the Police Special Operations. Let me see if they have augmentations.
They do.
They do have a few, so we'll discuss those. So the augmentations, which you'll see start on page 77, overtime special operations. You do see a description on what they're trying to utilize it for. Staff due to callbacks, investigative timelines. Again, trying to create efficiencies with their overtime. One of the things that's been cut, and this is on the fire side and the PD side, and they're rebuilding still a little bit, is on the overtime. It's really finding that sweet spot, especially when you're down staff. You're going to get impacted on your overtime, and that's what you're seeing here. So they can react to services and things they need to do within the year. The other ones are smaller ones, but they are new items. DVR examiners, facial recognition, leads on time. So a different equipment for that PD can utilize to expand on their investigation services. The next one is going to be for ballistic plate carriers and crime scene cameras. Large, probably what you're seeing is equipment, right? Expanding on their equipment, getting the new technology in any department is standard to what you'll see from a department request. It's just them getting up to par where they need to be with the technology of today's era. Okay. Is there any questions on that department? Okay. Moving on to page 80, which is support operations. I do not see any augmentations overall for this department. This is where you'll start seeing a lot of the shifting and moving because of the new department. This is the 205 that we referred to earlier. So that's why you see a lot of zeros and the new salaries. Again, it's not new staffing, it's just a shifting and better preparing the budget for the needs of the department so they can allocate things as they need to instead of gobbling it up into one and making it more difficult. So moving on to page 82, which is field operations. Let's see if we have augmentations. We do, so we have two. It looks like overtime collateral duties, again, same thing with PD, and some more supplies, 20,000 for SWAT and CRT supplies, and overtime collateral duties, an addition of 50,000 from their previous budget year. So again, staffing issues and overtime impacts, making sure that when we do have a critical situation, we're not worried about budget, we're reacting and we're moving forward. Okay. See no questions, we'll move on to Division 215 on page 87 for Animal Services. I don't believe there's augmentations for this one, so there is overall status quo. Moving on to page 90, Code Enforcement. Again, you're seeing it zero out. It's really just a shifting and consolidating to where the format in which they want to see it. So let's move past that. That'll take us to page 94, which is Fire Services. Fire Services overall, I'm sure they have some augmentations.
Look at, he's going out to
Chief's
the
nodding his
restroom.
head off over there.
So some of the augmentations you're going to see over time, $50,000. Actually, I think we reduced this, right, because it was higher. So we actually did take a hard look at it and reduced it down. The next one is, again, overtime investigative services. This comes down to the fire marshal and then be able to react to and get the training that they need, so they're staying up to their investigative services duties they need, because we are limited within that department, right? So the next one is part-time services. So this goes from 0 to 50. I mean, for part-time services from any department, it's getting that assistance they need. You can't get a full-time position all the time, but you need somebody to do some of the clerical work and things of that nature. So within the department, it gives you a little bit of information. It talks about the city gate plan and things of that nature to assist that department, again, just to get better equipped so the fire investigating services can do their duties. The next one is self-containment breathing apparatus. Just same thing, equipment. It's their standard equipment and getting purchases they need to get to where they need to be to make sure they're in compliance too as well. Next one is computer software maintenance and minor equipment miscellaneous. There is a description on here for the Knox key systems. It's a security system. Does everybody know what a Knox key system is? Yeah. So basically the Knox box are just a security box so that fire department can get into facilities that they need to get into. So they're not locked out. They don't have to break down doors. So the next one is just minor equipment. Purchasing for a cubic for the fire admin, an increase of 1,400, not very large, but it is a change. The next one would be minor equipment again, breathing apparatus. Again, same thing, SCBA's items to make sure that they have the appropriate gear and mask and things like that for the equipment they have. Next one, moving into, this is page 105, by the way. So again, minor equipment for the arson investigation, a request of 4,500 that has been created into it. It's for the department for the purchase supplies and assets with supporting investigation fire. This looks like it's going to be a laptop, full face air mask and things of that nature. So again, some more equipment overall. Next one on page 106, minor equipment, rescue equipment. Again, this is just more equipment requests, pretty standard for what you'll see from both public safety. Telephone and tablet services. This is more of an increase due to their transfer over into the Stanislaus Regional 911 system. So they do have a slighter increase, but not large overall. It's just so they can make that transition and get the appropriate equipment they need for the dispatch services. Okay. Man, he's got a lot. So the next one is outside contract labor. Overall for fire engines surplus, this is actually for, this is the maintenance actual overall. Outside contract labor, their fleet is getting older. We know it. That's another conversation we're going to have in the short term about potentially what the fire stations, or not the fire stations, but the fire engine fleet looks like. He's already looking at price points. Just to kind of give you a brief overview of the conversations we've been having, fleet overall from the fire services has really been impacted. You think delays for other services is bad? They're looking at 3 to 5 years out now for one truck. That is massive. And now they're coming into the situations where they got to beat the CARB deadlines, which is in 26. So we're having some hard conversations on how we deal with this. Fire really buckled down and created a more overall cash flow model and how we deal with the situation. But those are conversations we'll be looking to have with you at a later date. Okay. That will transition us into page 109, public facilities. Again, this is still in the general fund overall. Primarily what you're going to see is just overall maintenance salaries. I don't see any augmentations, so they're pretty much status quo. Next one we're going to see on page 112, park maintenance, same thing. This is general fund impact. Let's see if we have any. I don't see any augmentation, so for the most part, they're status quo. Page 115, parks, recreation, and public facilities. I do not see augmentations, therefore, again, they're pretty much status quo.
Can I ask Eric a question real quick?
Sure.
There was some emails going back and forth about some sort of an object that would pick up the trash and people wouldn't be touching it. And it would make it healthier, safer when they're going into encampments and things of that nature. Did you ever find out a cost on that?
We did. I think that's an augmentation will come up in the non-general.
Okay, wonderful, thank you.
Okay, so again, page 15. Don't have any augmentations, therefore we'll move forward. Next one on page 118, recreation program events. These are pretty status quo within these departments. They pretty much got these programs nailed down and we run pretty much right through it. Recreation sports on page 121. Again, pretty status quo. They identify their programs. They're actually looking to start consolidating some of these accounts. That's why you'll see some of the zeros, because they're breaking it down into just groups now, where they used to have everything broken out. Just a common joke that I had when I first go through this budget process. They had a line item for chalk. And it was like, what? It was like, so.
That's transparency right there.
And they miss it, for some reason, but.
Director Moreno, I have a question.
Sure.
Looking on page 122, seeing like the recreation expenses.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I'm referencing the right amount. Just that their, revenues total goes down significantly from what was budgeted in 22-23, and in maintenance, there was quite a big difference between last fiscal year and this fiscal year. Is that because of, obviously not on revenues, but is that because of allocating things directly to Measure A, or what's the big change?
Was there an allocation for rec? I believe there was, right? We transferred it over. 121. Well, the way we can define that is looking at the zeros accounts and what is consolidated up. So let me back up. It was. So at the top of page 121, we have a transfers in for the parks labor. And so you don't see that revenue stream coming in. So you do see that expense drop too as well, though. So you don't have that. But that's why your revenues are offsetting. Any other questions? Thank you. So moving forward past sports, we're now on aquatics. That is page 127. I don't believe we have augmentations for this one, therefore it is an overall status quo budget. Not a large dollar amount floating through here, but it is an important program, obviously, for the city. Moving forward, page 130, we have recreation, preventive youth. Again, these are our play programs where we do get grants in different natures where we're able to cover these costs. So I don't believe there's augmentations again. So there's no other additional request.
I would just like to take this opportunity to say that, the play program and the after-school program makes a huge difference for parents in our district or in our area. So if ever there is interest in expanding that, I would be all ears.
Paid for by.
We are now moved on to page 134. This is our tourism account, Fund 120. There is some augmentations, basically moving things around this is for the Pedretti Lights. So we are making a request for the Pedretti Lights project to move some of that funding and get it all consolidated, and it's an additional too, right?
Is that all covered now, 100%? Because we were short. Eric?
We are short. That's what the augmentation is.
Okay, does that cover all of it?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's your biggest overall within the augmentations of that. See no other question? Basic tourism, for those who may not know in the public, that's funded by TOT, so a transit oxygen tax. That's the
Heads
primary
and
funding
beds.
source. So moving on to page 137, that is our Fund 205 sports facility. I don't believe there's augmentations for this, but let me check. Nope, yeah, there is. So we do have a couple augmentations in here. 2 scoreboards for $14,000. An increase in supplies line item 2,500. Large overall, but I know the scoreboards has been a topic of conversation for some time now. So the next one is again some more additional scoreboards. This is for Ready Park, $28,000, and again some increased cost as far as general services. Again, I know these scoreboards have been talked about quite a few times. So seeing no questions, we'll move on to, we're almost there. Page 144, the engineering department. So before we get into the engineering department, there's something I do want to talk about, and it's kind of a topic that I've talked about slightly, but I want to kind of go through. So the engineering department, as well as the building department, typically what you see is these two departments in their own, or within the general fund. At some point, they broke them out, basically try to treat them as a standalone. And so these both departments have ebb and flow. They have their good years when building is good or projects are good. They have their bad years because they don't have a lot of projects floating through potentially. So what happens is you're going to see some gains and losses within this department. The engineering fund is one that's been talked about quite often. We talked about in the past, prior to me, even about a deficit within that fund. So you can see in my spreadsheet and how we look at the cash model and what that looks like. The proposal and the conversation I'd like to start having is to bring these two funds back into the general fund. Basically what it is they generate fees, they do bring in money, but there is a large piece on both sides for development services where there is no capture of cost. So what you're seeing in engineering is a good aspect of it. So we started to take action to close that gap on the engineering side. And what you're seeing is basically a subsidy coming in from the general fund. And you can see that on the spreadsheet on your screen. One for $383,000, another one coming from the general fund for $145,000, and then you also have a tourism for $300,000 coming in. So quite a few dollars come in there to try and plug that hole. So if you look at it overall, and you take my spreadsheet, you see the ending cash balance for 21-22. You see the actuals. That's as of today. The engineering funds shows a slight loss. Again, that's just where we are today. It doesn't mean that that's where we're going to be at the end. We do have some allocations that need to be made, so they may be able to catch up with the closing months. But the proposed budget for 23-24, they actually have a gain of $300,000. Well, why? Why do they have a gain, right? Well, it's because of those subsidies down there. So you look at the subsidies below, where basically the first two are coming in, getting it zeroed out, and the 300 by resolution is saying that's going to chew up the cash issue that we have for the fund balance or offset that fund balance. So you see their overall $2 million in the bottom line, just looking at it from a cash value standpoint. Now looking at the building department actually has a gain. It has a gain at the end of fiscal year of 21-22 as a cash basis of $2.4 million. Although they are reflecting a 22-23 a small loss. Again, these are still early numbers. We may be able to close that gap. But you can also see within the 23-24 that their proposed budget, which we'll come to, we haven't come to that department yet, they actually have a loss of $756,000, which is very substantial. So if you take the cash issues running through that, basically if you run through the net of the two, you actually come with a combined fund loss of $532,000, right? Basically what's happening is the building department at some point will start chewing through that reserve. What has happened is they've got a large permit through the Amazon purchase or the Amazon project, which has bulked them up on their cash basis. We're going to end up subsidizing at some point if we do especially have a budget loss of $756,000 every year. We're going to end up doing the same action. So what I'm proposing is take a hard look, and we don't have to take this action today. This is preliminary conversation on these funds because we do need to address it. We can't ignore it. If this is really a method in which I propose that we can actually close that cash gap by merging the two and bringing them into the general fund and having to take a smaller bite at closing that gap instead of taking a bigger bite in future years where potentially they could either both be worse or be better. We don't know. So the only way to actually do this is to actually bring them back into the general fund and gobble them up. And traditionally, this is where you see these departments anyways.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, what do other municipalities do? They have it in their general fund?
Yeah, they're treating them basically as, I shouldn't say they, but they're treated currently as basically like an enterprise fund.
Okay.
Stand on your own, make your own money, and go forward. I mean, it doesn't work
It
because
doesn't
the
work
development,
because
the way the structure works.
pre-development
Unless you want to
meetings
start
are free.
being charging fees on the front end, which that means we're not necessarily business friendly.
You can't
And you'll
cheat.
get a lot of pushback. You're not gonna be able to cover the costs, and that was what the 145,000 is subsidy to try and close that gap.
Right.
But that resolution was so far back, I mean, in today's dollars, that's not material enough. We need to revamp that structure, and the best way we can do that, instead of going through some analysis every year and what that differential looks like, is just to bring them back into the general fund, and let's have that
And that's where you
conversation.
find them in most municipalities or the municipalities that you've seen.
Correct.
Okay, thank
Does
you.
that erase the debt that we owe that auditors have told us for many years to pay off? We move it, it
will.
cancels everything?
It will. So basically, you take the accounts balances, you merge them, and then you have to find we're going to have to fund that difference. So potentially looking at maybe the tourism fund, because it's already taking that 300,000 anyways, and gobbling that out because it does have a reserve there too, and proposing to use a one-time money transfer to close that gap so it doesn't impact the general fund. Although I love a balanced budget, I want to keep that balanced budget, right? I don't want to take it into a negative, so a one-time class surplus. And then because of that, increment the size of it, we can move forward with our revenue gains and gobble that up in the future years. Okay. So we'll come back and we'll talk about it a little bit more, but that's my proposal today. I know that's a big topic, so I don't want to get too far, but just so you're aware, that's what we're discussing right now. Okay? All right, so engineering department on page again 144. There are no augmentations at this time, but so pretty much status quo. We're looking at our revenue streams overall. We do see some slight increases, but not a large overall. The next one is the planning department. We are now bouncing it back into the general funds. I do not see augmentations, therefore overall it's a status quo budget. Now on to the building department, which we just discussed. Building department is on page 50. I do not see augmentations. Again, as their overall budget looks like, we have a negative loss of 756. Again, just talking about that conversation. So next one is IT services. IT services actually had an augmentation for the full website design. And they have some other augmentations that we talk about though. But what we did is actually worked with IT and identified a different funding source. So we're identifying the PEG funds, which is a different overall program in which how we receive funds. Basically the program is basically around our internet providers. They pay into this fund as far as an obligation that they have. It's built around communication for City Hall, city staff to be able to communicate out to the public. So I found a good nexus in that sense of the way so that we can build it into the website because that's how we primarily communicate anyways.
Awesome.
Okay. So yes, they made a request. They had an augmentation. We generally just shifted it into another fund. So the augmentations they currently do have within the budget, quite a few. So one is for overtime, again, trying to address the needs that they have, standard for most departments overall, especially with kind of the uptick in the IT aspects and what we're looking at and the restructuring and how they want to be proactive. Next one is for $20,000 for an AC unit. This is really just to maintain their service system.
What?
Yeah.
They can go to the warmings in the cooling center.
So maybe they'll get a van and they can haul them back and forth. I don't know.
Right,
but-
okay, all right.
Sprinter.
It's a Sprinter? Are you
Thanks,
gonna,
Chief.
We could share it. Dual services, that's what we do, right? So that's,
Gonna be efficient.
trust me, if those units go out, it's gonna cost you more than 20 grand.
Right.
Trust me. So the next one is a vehicle. I don't think the EAC will keep up with those servers, but still, I mean, there is a vehicle. Basically, they're driving a van. It's quite a few ages on it. Not a lot of miles, but it is still something that at some point they need to replace, so they can put racks and things they need so they can be more efficient. The next one is for computer maintenance, $5,000. This is for the GIS system overall. The next one is for contract services. Really what a lot of this is coming down to is making sure that we have the contracted services that we need, especially for some of the large push on ITs that we're going to be doing for the projects that are becoming, i.e. maybe the website and the other things that they're going to be moving on. IT is really looking at, they're starting to structure and meet with all departments as more of a technical overall group for all departments to look to the future and what makes sense, not just for the website, but what they're doing today. So they're really revamping revamping and taking a hard look at our technical aspects and how we can be more efficient and start to plan for the future on components that departments need, but also that fits the mesh of our new world system and all the coming website too as well.
Getting that aerial imagery, Nick, will save staff time a lot. That's a big deal. I'm glad you're on top of it.
So that concludes my budget presentation for the booklet. We got through that.
I do have one question, sorry.
Go right ahead.
And this is a question for our finance director. How's the council doing with spending Measure A funds, in your opinion? Have we heeded the spirit of Measure A?
Very much so. I mean, so when you look at prior to me coming in the adoption of Measure A, you're in dire need, right? You couldn't balance your budgets. You're impacting services overall. The passing of Measure A has been a great standpoint and action that the council has taken to be able to stabilize not only your budget, but services as a whole. If we did not have Measure A, that reorg would not have happened. Not at all. And basically what would happen is you would have a detriment on all services, not just public safety, but your planning, your building department. You would see such a lag within your departments as far as how permits get through and processed, how the development gets through and processed. You would hear so many complaints in which because they didn't have the levels they needed to be able to process the information or the funding to be being able to outsource it. So how do you deal with that? You basically create a lag in the whole process overall. So without Measure A, we'd be having a really different conversation on how we do things. So now looking to the future in Measure A is maintaining what we got, growing appropriately, and make sure we watch our financials and manage our budget.
I have another general question. In the spirit of balanced budgeting,
Yeah.
In this current fiscal year, we had, $250,000 in change that happened at the mid-year budget review in terms of augmentations. Is it prudent or recommended to include something in our budget at this point that kind of, factors in anticipated mid-year augmentations?
So mid-year, the way I look at it as far as the budget process is, when we sit down with the departments and we look at, okay, this is what we can afford. When you get into mid-year, if we have gains in revenues that are offset from what we're currently projecting, we could have another conversation about what those augmentations look like and potentially bring those back. But without having the identified funding source, it's more of you got to see how your sales tax is going to come in. We pretty much know how our property is actually going to come in. So you have a change or an adjustment in there, but really what you did is you captured some of the revenues within that overall budget cycle or this budget year. So what I like to do is we went to the reserves a lot prior to this, okay? You'd have staff reports coming in saying we're going to the unrestricted reserves. Within this budget year, you haven't seen that, right? We've really moved away from that, and that's because we have a better budget process in the sense of the way we're saying, let's take a hard look at what we're doing, what do you need, and let's move forward. So when a department comes to me, our director says, hey, we need to do this. Okay, well, let's look at your budget. What does that look like? Do you have salary savings? How do we live within our means? And there's going to be unforeseen things, and you don't know how to get that
Like
done,
gas,
right?
price of gas went-
And so you're going to have those potential spikes or risk factors, but we sit down, have a conversation, and say, how do we get this done? And maybe that's a reserve conversation, depending on what it looks like, but reserve is always going to be my last resort.
And as far as coming back and talking about capital and what we do, I mean, we put nothing towards vehicles, et cetera, so at some point, we gotta start thinking about how that looks, right?
So we have started to bolster up our vehicle replacement program. A lot of departments are funded in the sense of the way PD actually got cut. PD and fire got cut slightly. That's why you're seeing the augmentations, because they're starting to staff up. With those staff ups comes the equipment. That's why when we look at reserves as far as Measure A, ARPA, whatever it is, I like to focus on one-time cost factors, right? It's just good practice in that sense of the way. So we'll be coming back, having different conversations on what that looks like. We don't want them to go backwards, right? They're starting to bulk up. They're starting to get, we're having issues purchasing because of purchasing issues. but we're starting to get back to where we need to be. We don't want to go backwards. We don't want to be seeing the Crown Vics anymore, right? We want to make sure we move forward so that we're getting the staff the equipment they need and vehicles they need so they can stay safe and we can prolong. There's a good balance between the whole thing as far as having old fleet, but it's costing you too much to maintain it, right? Because of all the maintenance factors. You have to find that balance. And so we're having conversations again with departments and saying, what does your model look like? What is your evaluation? How does it all work? And so they've really revamped their models and structured it. Cash is always a problem, right? So if you didn't get your allocation, you just got to start moving stuff around. So that's kind of how it comes up to be, especially on the PD side where you have a larger fleet. At some point, you're going to have to catch up. You got to, especially when you're coming into the deficit where fire's at in fleet. Again, they're up to it, not just because of supply chain issues, because of carb issues now, right? So you have to have that hard conversation, and we're doing that now to make sure we can make a proper proposal and request at the prudent time.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and, if you wouldn't mind, hand the microphone. If there's somebody wishing to speak regarding all the sausage we just made. Ryan, go ahead.
All right, I took a few notes during this. So I saw $2.6 million in opera funds remaining. If that money is being taken away, I would like to see that being spent in a productive way, because if there are talks of that money potentially going away, we definitely need to take full advantage of that. And then it was $10,000 going to social media. I think that's kind of ridiculous. Like, that should be something that every department should basically be able to do for free. It's free to post online. It's easy to take a picture and then just post it. Like, there should be no budget necessarily needed for that. But that's my feeling on that, at least. And then that's basically everything. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll close public comment. Thank you for all that presentation. We'll see it come back in a little different format and tighten it up and get it through. All right, anything else you wanted?
No, that was enough.
Right?
Thank you.
Thank you, good job, you guys. City manager reports, is there anything, Mr. Wilson, that you want to speak to?
Not this evening.
All right, thank you for that. Council items for future consideration.
Yes, I have one. And just to, kind of round out all the financial talk that we've had, City of Turlock has a treasurer who is in charge of our investments. And I would, as a fellow elected official in our city, I think it would be great if we could hear from the treasurer, at least twice a year or something, and to also, have a presentation on our city investment policy to really kind of understand the side that we're not seeing directly into the budget.
Anybody else? You wanted reserve policy, is that what you're whispering?
Yeah, part of a small presentation on it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We're going to touch it real quick.
Okay.
Don't get too far into it.
Oh, I'm sorry, Isaac. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yep. You just want to have the whole night, don't you?
It's my time to shine.
Okay.
Did you have a reserve one too?
Yeah, PDF. That's okay. I'll just let that open.
Sure.
Yeah, we're gonna have a general conversation, so we do have a reserve policy. You saw it on the agenda tonight. We pushed it forward from a public hearing, just so I want to have a small conversation on the topic overall and what we're kind of proposing. I'll feed the document. I was gonna put it up, but that's fine. We can send it out so you can see it for the public hearing when it comes up. So within the document itself, we'll kind of break down definitions and how the program is actually gonna work. So basically, in general, you're looking at two components. 15% working capital reserve and a 5% emergency reserve. So within the document itself, it probably breaks down what that looks like. Basically, in this sense, they're two different components, but they kind of work simultaneously. One is the emergency reserve. So, for example, we have a large flooding like we recently have, and we need some major expenses, but it's not budgeted for. Council can take action and make sure we can utilize those funds to make sure we can do what we need to do. The 15% is just a large same thing. It's only emergency standpoint where your revenues are not keeping up. You can dip into that, but again, that's council reserve, or that's council action too as well. So when I say we're having reserve, it's this money that we set aside in a sense for what we need for special circumstances where our revenues are actually not keeping up due to market issues or whatever it may be. But within the policy itself, and we talked about the 20% overall and what that number looks like previously, there's also within their actions on how to utilize whatever that surplus above that 20% is. So one of the major components, it's actually broken into three different ones. One, primarily what you hear me talk about a lot, is addressing our UAL. I'd like to start addressing our UAL by establishing two-prong approach, looking at making advance payments and also establishing a 115 trust. 115 trust kind of stabilizes your overall program, and then your overall additional allocations will flatten out that bell curve that we talked about. So again, we'll start seeing what that methodology looks like when we start looking at the overall reserve. Reduction of debt in the short term, what that means is you're saving on long-term interest, right? These are one-time monies, utilize them as one-time monies. Don't create them as far as ongoing expenses. So we're paying down those obligations to save on interest. I wonder what that debt obligation will look like. The last one is on the capital improvement purchases. What does that mean? So again, one-time dollars, things come up, fire trucks, things like that, that come up. They're large expenditures, they're unforeseen, or we just couldn't afford them, right? So when we cut things out of the budget, it's not what we want to do, but we can't afford everything. We have to be mindful and fiscally responsible in what we do to make sure that we have a balanced budget overall, just for good fiscal practice. But we do have actions in which we can do to try and maintain that when whatever new streams come up, and be fiscally responsible in how we deal with that so that we don't get ourselves going backwards, i.e. vehicles themselves, right? So basically that's kind of the model that we're looking at. I'll feed the policy so you can gather feedback prior to the public hearing. But I wanted to kind of give you a little touch on what that overall, what I'm proposing and how it's all going to fall together. So when we start talking about, we'll talk a little bit bigger picture on how the program will work itself too as well. Any questions?
Look forward to seeing it.
All right, thank you.
All right. Council comments, questions, and announcements.
I have a announcement or comment, I suppose. A couple 10 days ago or so, I went to the League of California Cities City Leaders Summit up in Sacramento. There was a lot of really good advocacy for, local issues there, and also some really good education on relevant topics that, I felt is helpful as someone who's trying to get in the weeds on policy, and things that I've been able to pass on to City Manager Wilson, our city attorney, other council members. But, with that in kind of buried in a small line item in the budget was City of Turlock not going to renew our membership with the League of California Cities, something that 99% of other California cities are a part of. And so I'm disappointed to see that go, because I feel like our membership in that is showing that we value collaborating with other cities on common goals, and really learning from other cities and what they can do. So I think it's a shame that we're going to lose that, because I think it's a really valuable resource.
Comments? Announcements?
And I have a book.
I know.
Well, I want to point out, there were 49 roads on today's agenda, and it passed, and that is a substantial amount of roads. So we are moving forward with 49 roads. So good job,
All right, road
everybody. Everybody, road doctor. Yeah, he's gone. Huh? Anyway, 49 roads is a great amount to start with. More to come. Speaking of roads, I was in D.C. with Stan Cogg last week. We met with Senator Feinstein's office, Senator Padilla's office. He actually was in our meeting personally. We went with the staff of the Department of Transportation, Intergovernmental Affairs, Highway Transportation, Federal Rail, Federal Transit. We went to the White House. We saw the senior advisor for Transit and Economic Recovery. We met with Congressman Duarte's office. I want to thank Congressman Duarte for giving the city of Turlock 2 earmarks in his earmarks. We got 1.9 million for Golden State Boulevard line extensions and 1.6 for positive drainage on the east side. So thank you, Congressman Duarte.
And Townsend.
We got a very positive response from Senator Padilla and the White House Senior Advisor for Infrastructure. I was able to talk to them about our SRWA project. The White House was very interested. The gentleman I spoke to, he's supposed to be giving me some feedback in the next week or so on possible other means of grants or financing of, in addition to what we already have out there. So I was really happy. And then the Department of Transportation said we need to check into some FEMA sources. The FEMA just doesn't have just money for emergency. We can kind of say that our water not being available in the quantities and qualities is an emergency. So they suggested we talk to FEMA about some grants. Let's see, we got some additional train monies from Senator Padilla's office. So those are big wins for Stan County and for Turlock. And finally, May is Bike to Work Month. And so you're going to see that we're going to come out with our social media. You can go to stanniscruise.com and sign up, ride your bike, log your miles, and be put in for a $1,000 early bird cash prize, a grand prize of $2,500. More prizes, $500 gift certificate to Airbnb, some restaurants, and save some carbon emissions and get in better shape. So I encourage everybody to help Turlock.
We're gonna win.
We're gonna win. We want everybody to start riding a little bit of their bikes. Anyway, so thank you, and that's all I got.
For you, ma'am.
Hilarious. You guys are overachievers. Just saying.
Competitive much?
All right, Mr. Officer Ian Rodriguez. Love me some Ian Rodriguez this week. You know, it makes our job easy when a constituent reaches out with a problem and says, and I know Ian, and I'm going, yep, and this is a neighborhood services problem, so we're gonna call Ian. And of course, he's responsive. The problem is resolved. I'm just very appreciative. The other question I had, Mr. Wilson, if I can put you on the spot. Mr. Puffer asked earlier about SRWA's opening date. Did that change? Do we know what's really going on?
There's been some delays in the project. It's expected now to open sometime towards the end of this calendar year, is my recollection.
Pearl Harbor Day.
In December, yes. In terms of what was the vehicles that he asked about, we're gonna bring that back to the council in the next month or so, but there's not a compelling need to have them right now.
Thank you.
Okay. So tomorrow morning, Divert Inc. is groundbreaking at 10 a.m. 4407 West Main. And then Arbor Day is also tomorrow at Walnut and Christofferson at 1 o'clock. And then Love Turlock on Saturday. Got to be doing that. And then actually Sunday, the Sikh community has an event out there from like 10 to 2. So they want all of us to come out there. It's really a cool event. And I believe that you'll be speaking there as well. So we have a closed session, ma'am.
Yes, for closed session, we have conference with labor negotiators, California Government Code 54957.6A. Agency designated representative is Deputy City Manager Sarah Eddy, and the employee organization is the Turlock Management Association Public Safety.
All right. Should we have something to report out, we will come back with it. Thank you. are live. There is nothing to report out. Thank you and good night.